Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil dich ein Genialwalter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, und ein Platz genossen ist. Weil dich ein Genialwalter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, und ein Platz genossen ist. Weil dich ein Genialwalter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. You might notice that it is not Saturday, but sometimes I do like to do a little midweek socialism. Because here's the thing. Not everyone is around on Saturdays in the evening. Sometimes people have lives. Sometimes people want to go on dates or go to parties or go bowling or go to a movie or go to a concert. They don't necessarily want to watch socialism on Saturdays. And so every once in a while, and we've taken a little bit of a break from it for the past couple months because we did Red May, and Red May was like a solid effing month of socialism all the time. Every once in a while, if I'm feeling sassy, I like to do a little midweek socialism if the opportunity presents itself. And today, well, it does happen that an opportunity has presented itself for a nice little midweek socialism journey. We're going to take the super chat from Naruto. Sorry for all the DMs over the past 24 hours. That's all right, Naruto. You can DM me anytime. I'll keep you updated on the progress of getting HG Tutor to cover Candace Owens. It is absolutely critical that we get HG Tutor to diagnose Candace Owens, okay? Come on. Like, there is no one that is more narcissist on the internet. But I appreciate your efforts there, Naruto. We'll keep an eye on that. But guys, so here's what was happening. So, as you know, I keep a watchful eye on some of our favorite leftist accounts, our favorite leftist websites. And one of the places I've really been diving into lately is I'm trying to catalog the small little academic centers at the universities that are pushing this crap. Because here's the thing, it's like this stuff is presented all people think that when we're doing Socialism Saturday, and by the way, if you're new, if you have never actually been to a Socialism Saturday, I know this is not on Saturday, but we are doing socialism today. If you have never watched Socialism with me, these are not people that are off in some coffee shop somewhere. We watch real socialists These are the farthest left of the far left. These are not AOC. These are not Bernie Sanders. These are not CNN. These are not champagne socialists like Vosh. These are real socialist activists, okay? And where they tend to congregate is at the universities. And so we're talking about I pay attention to what's going on at the Ivy League schools, especially. But I mean, every single university in existence has these centers: the Center for the Study of Such and Such, the Center for Queer Studies, for Feminism, for Women's Studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some universities have hundreds of these centers. And guess what? Many of these centers have their own Twitter accounts and their own YouTube channels, and they put this content online. But because they're tiny, 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 tiny little social media properties, no one pays attention to them. But that's wrong. And some people might say, Carlin, these people have no views, therefore they have no influence. No, they do have influence because they are lecturing at Ivy League universities. I mean, all different types of universities, really. But when you're giving lectures to students at Ivy League universities, that is influencing the elitist of the elite. And those students are going to carry what they learned in the universities into their corporate jobs, up the corporate ladder. They're going to carry it with them when they go into politics. They're going to carry it with them when they go into entertainment. They're all going to be networking with each other. Do you guys see where I'm going? This is how the left got so much effing control to begin with, is they took over the universities, and they still congregate in the universities today, where they still lecture all over the place, and then they put their lectures online. And then one day, someone like me stumbles upon their lectures, and then we watch them on the internet. And this, guys, is how we get a sneak preview into where the left is going. If you have never watched Happy Hour with me on Fridays, which is when we watch woke training, it's kind of like an introductory class, and Socialism Saturday with me on Saturdays, which is Saturdays at 6 p.m., which is when we normally do this. When you watch those streams with me, you will get a preview of where the left is going, because what we figured out almost a year ago now is that if we go back and we watch real socialists from like 3, 4, 5 years ago, the talking points that the real socialists were using 3, 4, 5 years ago in their university presentations, in their conferences and things like that, those are the talking points of the Democratic Party today. So these people are influencing things. These people are quite literally dictating where the left is going. And that's why we watch them. The vast majority of people who do commentary about the so-called anti-woke space, the anti-woke movement, they have no idea what's going on. And the reason they have no idea what's going on, it's honestly not their fault. It makes sense. The logic that they're using makes sense. They are focusing on what is going on right now. What I mean by that is the news stories that are being broadcast all over the place, the protests that are happening right now, the TikTok videos that are getting posted. These are things occurring in real time. What we are doing is we're backing out of that, and we're going to the origin of where these ideas begin. And when we go to the origin of where these ideas begin, we get a preview of what is coming next. That is why my audience, and I firmly believe this, because we sit our butts down and we listen to them, we watch them in their full form, and we go to the source of where these ideas are coming from, which is the socialist activists, the Marxist activists that are in the universities right now, and we're going to watch some of them today. We are getting a preview of what is coming next. And that's why my audience knows more about what is going on the woke left and what we're going to have coming down the road than pretty much everyone else on the internet, because we watch it. We know it's real. They cannot gaslight us. Socialists come into our chat all the time and they try to gaslight us. They can't do that because we see for ourselves what's going on. and then we talk about it, and we break it down, and we dissect it. So let me show you what we're watching today. Today I was pinging around on a whole bunch of university websites. By the way, if you ever want to have some fun, go to Yale's website and search for just the word queer. You're going to come up with 55,000 results for the word queer on Yale's website. Fun fact. But that's not what we're looking at today. What we are watching today, is off of a small little YouTube channel. A tiny little YouTube channel with less than 100 subscribers. And this YouTube channel is FQTGSWS. Does anyone have any idea what this means? Let's just find out. Let's find out. I'm going to get you the proper term for what this means. I'm going to tell you. It is the Program for Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies, the Center for Research in Feminist, Queer, and Transgender Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. The University of Pennsylvania is an Ivy League school. It is located in Philadelphia. It's been around a really long time. Donald Trump went to the University of Pennsylvania. I believe the Trump children went to the University of Pennsylvania as well, though they went to the business school. This is not out of the business school. This is out of the College of Arts and Sciences, but it is all, after all, the same university. And so this is where this is coming from. And this YouTube channel is the specific YouTube channel for, it's not the YouTube channel for the University of Pennsylvania. It is the YouTube channel for this specific center at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, yes, exactly, Wharton, exactly, Senator Lindsey Graham, exactly. Now, guess who works at the University of Pennsylvania? Does anyone have any idea who works at the University of Pennsylvania? I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to fast forward and give you a hint of who works at the University of Pennsylvania. Sophie. Oh, Sophie. We love Sophie. Sophie is our favorite. We love her, our dear friend Sophie. Hang on, let me show you who Sophie is. I should have pulled her Amazon page up. Hang on, you guys are in for a treat today if you don't know Sophie. Oh my God, you guys are gonna thank me so much. Sophie Lewis is the author of 2 books that you can buy now, currently on Amazon. She is the author of Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family, and the author of Abolish the Family, a Manifesto for Care and Liberation. I own both these books on Kindle. Sophie once said that I was just some flippant anti-communist and I had no idea about her work. Not true, Sophie. Not true. I have bought both your books. Okay, maybe I haven't read them cover to cover. I skimmed them. All right, I understand the basic mise-en-scène of what you're selling. I'll read them at some point. But yeah, these are real books, guys. And anytime I say that socialists want all children to be born via surrogacy, well, can you imagine where I'm getting those ideas from? Not only because there's a book called Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family. I don't know where I'm getting those ideas from at all, that they want all children born via surrogacy. So our friend Sophie is in the presentation today. Now, she's not the only one. And fun fact, this isn't even the first lecture from Sophie that we have watched at the University of Pennsylvania. We actually watched Sophie give another lecture at the University of Pennsylvania a couple months back on Socialism Saturday. Sophie gave a lecture at the Andrea Mitchell Center for Democracy at the University of Pennsylvania around the same basic ideas as I think we're going to hear about today. So this isn't even her first try, all right? And Sophie is our favorite activist because, well, first of all, I have to give Sophie credit. I do. Sophie is relatively easy to understand. Not all socialists are easy to understand at all. Some socialists are really hard to understand. Sophie, to her credit, has her ideas pretty well figured out. They're crazy, but she can explain them in a way that I think most people can actually understand what she's saying. By the way, guys, if you haven't ever watched socialism with us before, I want you to just be prepared that sometimes socialists do speak in a different language. Like I said, Sophie's pretty okay. But like if you don't understand what they're saying, just know that it's not you, it's them. They speak in code. You have to watch a lot of socialism to be able to osmose what they actually mean by a lot of these things. And we'll break it down and we'll try to explain it. So if you have questions, just ask in the chat. But Sophie is not the only one presenting today. She also has a friend, and let me read you about what we're going to see. We're first going to hear from Simone. Simone is the author of Being the Other Woman, Duke University Press, Dear Angel of Death, a whole bunch of books. She's an author of a whole bunch of books. She writes poetry. She's a graduate of Wesleyan University, also uber woke. She holds a JD from Harvard Law School, an MFA from the New School, and a PhD. So Simone has basically been in school her entire life. Look at this. Wesleyan, Harvard Law School, an MFA from the New School, and a PhD in English from CUNY. That's crazy. She is the Stephen M. Gorn Family Assistant Professor of English at the University of Pennsylvania. So one of the people we're going to hear talking about this is a named, probably tenured faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania. She also teaches on the writing faculty at Bard College. Oh, great. Sophie Lewis is a visiting scholar for research in feminist, queer, transgender studies at the University of Pennsylvania and a member of the teaching faculty at the Philadelphia branch of the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. Oh God, Reagan, your crush is back. Thank you, Hunter Biden's Coke Stash. Appreciate it. She is the author of Abolish the Family, a manifesto for care and liberation, and Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family, which Donna Haraway hailed as the serious radical cry for full gestational justice that I long for. These people call abolishing the biological family full gestational justice. Sophie's scholarship operates in the spheres of trans feminist cultural criticism and queer social reproduction theory. We did a whole Socialism Saturday a couple weeks ago about social reproduction theory. If people want to go back and watch that. And Sophie is a they. I think she's a she, they. Their interests include utopian critiques of the family, Marxism, and Black and anti-work feminisms. We haven't really dug into anti-work so much on Socialism Saturday. Maybe we'll do that this week. Their research currently focuses on etymologies of eugenics. Ooh, Sophie's thinking about eugenics. That's just great. Bioconservative and imperial feminisms, including narrative and so-called white slavery, past, present, Fremont, I don't even know what that word is, and trans-exclusionary whatever the F. A forthcoming book on the subject is tentatively entitled The Feminism of Fools, How Some Feminisms Hinder Feminist Liberation, from our old friends at Haymarket Books. Our favorite socialist book publishers are going to be publishing Sophie's next book. Isn't that great? Hunter Biden's Coke Stash says, hi, bot. Don't worry. I haven't forgotten about you. Hunter Biden's Coke Stash. Listen, man, I'm never going to turn down the money, but you don't have to send in super chats to send love letters to other people in the chat. You can just, talk to them. Trendlin asks a great question. Please explain again why people go by he, they, or she, them. Trendlin, that is a great question. And the answer to that question can be found on my Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. Let me get my little banner in the bottom there. Bing! And the way you would find that is to go to the Woke 101 series up at the top. And then I want you to scroll down until you see Elliot Page. And there's an article, and I'll put the link in the chat, called Why So Many People Are Non binary. And let me just pop this link in the chat on the YouTube. Then I will pop the link in the chat on the Rumbles as well. Thank you guys for watching me on Rumble, Odyssey, Rockfin, whatever alternative platform you're watching on. I do appreciate it. Essentially, the too long didn't read of why people go by he, they, or she, they is that the goal of the queer Marxists, of which Sophie is definitely a queer Marxist, she falls under the umbrella of queer Marxists. The goal of the queer Marxists is to create a world of non-binary people, a world full of theys. They don't want men transitioning to women. They don't want women transitioning to men, because that fundamentally upholds the gender binary. Whereas the goal of the queer Marxists, again, what we're watching today, is to abolish the gender binary, to eliminate gender. So anytime you see someone using he, they, or she, they, they're putting a foot into queer Marxism. They're not ready to go there yet, but they're just dipping their toe in the water, and they're going to get there eventually. But this is their way of kind of signaling that this is the school of thought that they are a part of. Guys, it is really critical to understand the difference between LGBT and queer. LGBT seeks to uphold the gender binary. Even trans people, even if someone is transitioning from a woman to a man or a man to a woman, they're still upholding the gender binary, which is that there are two genders and they are transitioning in between. Queer activists have hijacked the LGBT movement, and queer activists fundamentally seek to destroy the gender binary. They don't want there to be two genders. Okay. And so when queer activists use the word trans, and I actually have them on tape saying this on video, when queer activists say that they're trans, this is what's confusing people. They don't mean transition, they mean transform or transcend. So they're trying to transform gender from something that has two to something that has infinite, or they're trying to transcend the gender binary altogether. So do not be fooled. Anyone who is using non-binary pronouns is not in the LGBT camp. They are in the queer Marxism camp, and they are using language specifically to confuse you so that you conflate all these things together. Because when you conflate all these things together, they win. All right. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys will ask any questions as you have them in the chat. And of course, please do make sure you go subscribe to my Substack. Again, Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. You'll see that story in the middle there. A woke mob is trying to destroy my work. That's actually true. That's going on right now. So it's a great time to subscribe, because essentially I have this mob on Twitter that one of them actually paid money. This is true. And you can see the receipts in there. One of them actually paid money to become a paid subscriber to my site, and is now threatening to go and get all of my paywall content and just release it publicly on the internet, because they really think that people don't appreciate the work that I'm doing. They think that if they release my paywall content publicly on the internet, that means that people are going to cancel their subscriptions because they're trying to hurt me. They're also trying to steal my merchandise designs, doing all this stuff. Essentially, they're trying to cost me supporters. But I know that's not going to happen, because I know that you guys and people who watch my content and people who appreciate that I'm the only one on the internet talking about a lot of this stuff, you guys are going to support the work I'm doing. And I know that that's true. If you haven't yet become a subscriber, please consider doing so. It's $8 a month, $80 a year. This is what keeps me in business, guys. You can subscribe on Substack, which would be my recommendation. You can also subscribe on Locals. You can join my Patreon. All the links are in the description below. And I really do appreciate the support, guys. I'm completely 100% grassroots funded. I answer to you and only you. And my only job is to show you what's going on, to tell you the truth, to bring you the receipts, and to break down this stuff in a way that no one else on the internet is doing. And I really do appreciate the support. Another thing you can do to help my work out is by heading over to my merchandise store, which is unwokeart.com. I have some of the coolest merch on the internet, to include the limited edition Trump Indictment Victory Tour t-shirt. And I have to give a big shout out to my friend, Eric Matheny. Eric just got his Trump Indictment Victory Tour t-shirt in the mail. He's not wearing it, but he did take a picture of it. So you can see this is actually how it looks in person. And Eric only showed you the front of the shirt, but the back is just as good. Check it out, guys. We'll look at the shirt. The back. I have this shirt was inspired by concert t-shirts that you get at like a show. And so instead of tour dates on the back, what I did is every current indictment that Trump has against him is printed on the back, because this is the Trump Indictment Victory Tour t-shirt that you can only get exclusively on unwokeart.com. This is a limited edition shirt, so it's not going to be in the store forever. So make sure you get yours while you can. And again, you can see what it actually looks like in person over on Eric's Twitter. So the printing came out great, as it always does. I use really high quality materials. The shirt you're going to get is like a super nice soft jersey. It fits so well. It feels so nice and light, and the colors always look amazing on it. And I'm really excited that that Eric got his. You can get all sorts of other cool stuff in my store as well, including the All Tears Are Tasty tumbler that I have on my desk right now, and all sorts of other great stuff. And you can head over to unwokeart.com to check that out. And again, all the purchases do go to support the work I'm doing. There's all the Tears Are Tasty merchandise, which just, I mean, come on, isn't that the coolest design ever? I just love it. I love it. I am not going to apologize for how much I love my merch store, and I love creating it, and it's so fun, and I do appreciate it. Can I still pay to be a part of Schools Exposed? Yes, you can. And there's going to be more information coming on that soon, guys. Schools Exposed actually got a big update. Well, they're getting a big update. I'm working on the effing big update. And I apologize for people who are involved in that. It's just been a bear of a thing. It's taken so much more energy than I thought it would, because I realized when I initially launched it, I hadn't broken everything down as much as I needed to. So this is my mistake. I underestimated things, but I am going to be opening things back up. And I'm looking to get it done by the end of the month. And I really do apologize for how long that's taking, guys. I have not forgotten about this. I just have been trying to really, I had an epiphany a couple months ago. Well, more than a couple months ago now, I suppose, that like I was so far ahead and my community was so far ahead of where things were that I wasn't properly breaking things down for people who were new. So I basically have gone back, rejiggered a lot of stuff. I'm going to be launching a completely new thing, and that's going to be done by the end of the month. And I really, really do appreciate everyone's patience with this. We do have some content in there right now, but it's not fully built out to the extent that it's going to be built out very, very soon. And we're going to be all up and running for fall, and it's going to be so great. Just because I haven't been talking about it doesn't mean stuff hasn't been going on. So I do appreciate it, trying to let, and more information coming on that very soon. Nick says $8, less than 1 cup of bourgeois coffee, aka Starbucks. That's right, Nick, because when I go to Starbucks, I get a quad soy vanilla latte. And you guys can make fun of the soy all you want, but it tastes much better than the normal one, okay? Just tastes better. I like it better, okay? And my cups of coffee at Starbucks have been known to cost over $10, depending on where I am in the country. So yes, you can support my work over on the Substack for less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. And I really, really do appreciate it. Let's see. I think that's all the super chats I've got. All right, guys, we're going to jump into our presentation for today. Of course, we are going to play Socialism Bingo. Let me pop the Socialism Bingo card in the chat. Sarah has hugged and kissed that like button. So please do whatever you want to the like button, guys. You can mount the like button. You can snuggle with the like button. You can wave hello at the like button. Just no smashing of the like button. We're not heathens on this channel, all right? We try to upscale it a little bit more, but there is a shocking disparity between those of you who are watching right now and those of you who have you can fondle the like button if you like. That's all right. The like button doesn't mind, guys. I promise. Adrena says I make my own damn coffee. Normally I do too, Adrena. I just get Starbucks when I travel, all right? It's nice to have a treat every once in a while. Yes, you can coerce the like button, but the like button, just, buy it a drink after or something, I guess, if you're going to do something like that. Sin is not going to lick the like button today. Well, that's good to know, Sin. All right, guys, when you get your Socialism Bingo card, click Generate Card. You got a free square in the middle, and then we do lines or we do corners. Of course, our little bend to equity is that there is solidarity twice on the bingo card because I haven't fixed it yet. We do play Socialism Saturday Bingo when we do Socialism Saturdays. And again, if you guys are actually, how many people are new to socialism in the chat? Has anyone not watched Socialism Saturday with us before as I get the sound set up for this? Gloria is on the platonic side hug with the like button. All right, Gloria, I think that's a good way to go. Has anyone never watched Socialism Saturday with us? I'm just curious. Yasmin, you watch Socialism Saturday all the time. By the way, I wanted to tell you guys, okay, before we get started, can I share something that happened that is now completely undone, but you guys will totally appreciate this? So, and this is in honor of Yasmin, and I promise this has nothing to do with the presentation, but I'll do it while the chat's coming in. So, earlier today, you guys are going to fucking love this. Earlier today, I started getting followed on Twitter by a whole bunch of effing groypers. Where is it? Hang on. Where is it? There it is. So I started getting followed on Twitter by a whole bunch of effing groypers. Hang on. I got to show you guys this. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. And so I was like, why the hell are all these groypers following me? I wasn't upset or anything, but it was just weird. I had because the groypers all have that they're groypers in their screen name. And all of a sudden, I had all these new groyper accounts following me. I was like, what the hell happened? Why are all the, I was like, I don't mind or anything, but why are you following me, groypers? And then I found out that Nick Fuentes on his sock account, this used to be Nick Fuentes' sock account, okay? Nick Fuentes was following me on Twitter. And that's why I all of a sudden started to have all these groypers following me. And then I'm talking within 5 minutes of me discovering that Nick Fuentes' sock account was following me on Twitter, he got banned. He got suspended again. I did, but I actually sent him a DM. I said I slid into Nick Fuentes' DMs and I was like, Nick, why are you following me? I'm just curious. So that made my day. Honestly, I have to say, Nick, when you get another sock account, I'm going to follow you again. Please follow me back again, Nick, for the 24 hours before your new sock account gets banned. Because when Nick Fuentes gets back on Twitter, he usually just goes like Nick Fuentes gives no Fs, okay? And so he does all these Twitter spaces. He posts all the, I love following Nick Fuentes' sock accounts because he's always has another one that comes up. And then he holds a Twitter space and then he says crazy stuff. It's just entertaining. Yasmin and I were running to find Nick Fuentes' Twitter spaces, and apparently that's he liked a tweet that I sent and then he followed me. Okay, so that's my fun story. Now let's get back to business. Thank you for allowing me that moment of zen, but I was just like, oh God, what's gonna go wrong? All right, let me see. Are there any new people watching Socialism with us today? I think I saw Jules maybe new. Let me see. Well, if you are new to socialism and you have questions about what's going on, please chat in and let us know. I will do my best to try to break it down. We are going to watch the whole presentation from start to finish, guys. The boring bits, the cringy bits, all of it, because you cannot understand socialism unless you watch the full form of what it is. Guys, let's get this party started. We are watching our favorite Abolish the Family activist, Sophie Lewis, speak at the University of Pennsylvania, and she is joined by Simone White, who has degrees from everywhere and also teaches at the University of Pennsylvania.
In a number of
Hang on, there we go.
And I'm going to read just a little bit from that so that people can have an opportunity to hear what's going on. But I kind of want to spend most of my time talking about the ways in which that work was really more of an opportunity to move that thinking
yes,
in a number
we are
of
doing that
different
later.
directions, and to sort of as a jumping off place for getting to a place where I have not yet gotten, in a kind of in a hopeful movement towards a kind of feminist theorization that I am in the middle of and can't really say what the end point of is yet. But what I'll do is I'll read a little bit from the poems. I'll say a little bit about the progress since the poems, and then I'll read a tiny
Welcome,
bit
Jules. Good to
of
have you
critical
here.
work that is really being drafted like at this moment. That's sort of part of the flowering of the work, and that will be it for me. So I'm going to start just by reading a couple of poems from Or I'm Being the Other Woman. I'm going to read from my phone so that I don't have to look at other things from the screen. Just a second. All the young people read from their phones, but I'm not really young, so I have an excuse. Okay, this has a
It is the most
epigraph
dystopian of the
from
dystopian, Alexa, isn't
a
it?
song called Mistress, which is a song by a rapper named who's called Gunna. Gunna actually happens to be incarcerated in Atlanta in Fulton County right now as a part of this very complex RICO prosecution that him and a score of other defendants have been swept up in a state RICO prosecution that include Gunna and Young Thug. It's very complicated, and I actually hope to write about it soon, but I'm not there yet. But anyway, the line from the song is "Got me a real mistress, and she's independent." I have become misaligned or crooked with respect to the field of dependency, basically a free radical. If I keep looking at the word independent, I can see it surrounded by practices of sex work. It is always pussy that gives me value, and this fact of undeniable facticity
Always
must
pussy that gives
also
me
enter
value.
my estimation of the state of my own excess. The forms my life takes
Reading this like
have
it's high
preserved
art.
intensity, dissolute facticity. Whatever means I use to accomplish liberation will lead inevitably to the destruction of someone's marriage. That's true. You rail against men, my lover writes to me. We use an encrypted form of digital messaging as if anyone cares what we say to one another. Certainly, I do not believe that anyone does, but these are his wishes. Men, as they exist in their bodies, are not the subject of my interest, so I do not rail against them. That is a misrepresentation of the whole of my aesthetic and phenomenological project, which involves taking up the vision I have been given of my own freedom. I have been given a vision of it, life beyond use. The white women who own the fancy nail salon I go to fired the manager I loved, a Black woman photographer who treated me with professional respect for my time, my lack of it. She knew my work and the work of my sister. She let me use my paid-for seat as a place to weep behind the screen of her conversation, using herself as a blessed covering for me. I realized those bitches don't want me in here. I understood I had witnessed an act of aggression against our presence, our desire to be adorned, to have comforts, to cultivate the rot of this corruptible, all its deathy glory. The nigger woman is the mistress of the world. Optimal dependency being a flowering of sexual and other forms of competition. I don't think of the book as like so full of rage, but then I read the poems and I'm like, the book is full of rage. So we'll see what you think. Okay. This is not titled, it's just a section from later on in the book. No man has ever not tried to steal from me. That's wrong. The man who never tried to steal from me never wanted to be with me like that. While the man I was with who explicitly stole from me was so crazy at the time, I didn't think much of it structurally, or I could not think structurally at the time. In California, Prairie Light and scenes from Midwinter Day were coming to me in a confusing way via social media. I wrote to Laura I had a dream in which I was overcome or beset by a kind of erotic storm, encircled by lovers, that is, men, of whom I would say, fucking is eternally in the nature of our bond, the transmutational properties of masculinity, the three, forcefully whipping around me, having become a cosmos of presence to myself, my mimesis with no share of the bearing down. Inside their fucking gyre, I transmitted a signal for help, but it could not escape because the force of the dimensions which they were or were creating was a black hole. The real blackness of the hole was true. I woke up knowing what words to say. Say the dream, Laura. Within 2 or 3 days, I had been trying to identify the name of the pressures. No, I cannot remember what any of them had done to me. I try to remember forming an intention.
Is anyone getting anything out of this poem? Again, remember, this is an English professor at an Ivy League college lecturing at an Ivy League college. Yes, I did hear. Yes, I did hear the BDSME part of it. I did. Yes, this is high art right here.
Now I am going to act as crazy as possible and threaten to go to his job and tell his mama and his best friend what kind of person he is and how he's been stealing from me all these years and telling people I'm a spoiled bitch because I have all these degrees and won't take my baby out of private preschool. So I was acting crazy and smoking out the window of my house, screaming into the garden at the mourning doves, looking at me like I was crazy. I stopped when he said a number, I guess.
Probably true.
I can't remember
Rottweiler,
much about it because I
which is
got pretty
sad.
drunk afterward and woke up in the night thinking, Lord, I am not able to do this much longer. Please let this man see my humanity. In 2 or 3 days also, I had learned there was no name for the pressures. It was the most ordinary Black womanhood, which is not nameless, has all the names of us, and is nameless, and has no intention, and is strategic. One of the days, a young dancer came up to me and said, I don't know how to embody the musical problems. And I said, well, how does it make you feel? I began to speak of it myself when I felt myself growing more graphically male through its practice. I listened at deafening loudness in my car. Clearly, I am trying to hurt myself. The words, they say, they have a newness. I promise never to speak the words in my poems, not in defiance of interpretation, but because they are so creepily hostile and unfunny. The interior they assume in a dress so murderous, I don't see the point of repeating them. This is what words do. How does it make you feel? You are not allowed to have feelings. You are not allowed to have anything. And when you have something, somebody will try to take it from you. Don't doubt it for a second. There is no honor in patriarchy. It is a drug. Sometimes I allow.
Wait. She's suggesting that some hip hop artist that's in prison for a RICO violation wrote some poem or piece of music about how the patriarchy is offensive. I don't believe that's true. Does that ring true to anyone else? Because that doesn't make sense to me.
My eyes to roll back in its vicious pleasure. I can feel joy if I remember I am feeling the power of myself as a vacuous thing, an unknown thing, out of which words come under pressure, beginning to make new, so that the structure of the poem was falling down around me, as were the constitutive energies of what I was, such as they were visible or detectable to me. I sensed them breaking. They were already broken. This was the condition of which the poem must consist. The radiant materiality of circuitous attacks, some such as might be deflected, others helplessly slip inside what is. So that poem is it's about like a 75 or so page poem, so-called. And it consists of some prose sections and some sections that look more like verse, some sort of meditation specifically on the rap music that I sort of became focused on at the end of writing my last book, that is Dear Angel of Death, which I finished around 2018 with a kind of question about whether trap music held any sort of teachings for us about this sort of contemporary condition of not only Black art, but also Black studies, whether some of the sort of retentions and important insights of 20th century Black studies had not in some way begun to be displaced or challenged by what was actually happening in rap music today. And I got really obsessed with it, and I immersed myself in listening to this music, which I actually would have been listening to anyway. It wasn't a stretch or, a sort of step or a leap outside what I would normally have been doing. I listened to rap music and have listened to rap music since I was a teenager, and I'm
Thank you, Yasmin. I was
50
wondering
now,
about
so we
that.
sort of grew up together. We are exactly the same age. And
entrapment.
but
Got it,
I have
got
my
it.
moments where I didn't listen so much. I'm kind of a music nerd. I listen to a lot of different things, but I got very, very, very interested in particular in Future at one point. And I got very, very interested in Chief Keef and began to sort of focus in on those two artists and think about how poetically I could think about composing theory or criticism that was not literary criticism and wasn't focused on the lyrical content so much, which in some ways was not really what was happening in the music. But I needed to find ways to sort of speak through my interest, which had kind of already been done in Or on Being the Other Woman, just identifying what the interest was and what the emotional tensions or paradoxes were in the sort of, apparent misogyny and violence that the music sort of rehearses, and the sort of absolute pleasures that it then dispenses to not just me, but like billions of other people. And so that emotional paradox, which is like, in some ways, like not that new or interesting, and has been, part of the conversation that Saidiya Hartman and others have been having about this sort of combination of pleasure and pain that is part of the nature of Black so-called subjectivity. But I got really interested in it as maybe like not an aspect of subjectivity or something like that, but rather a signal about what others call Blackness itself. That is, that there was something very true and very real about the representation or expression
Professor,
that was
University
happening
of
in that music that
Pennsylvania.
had something to say to me about the social conditions in which especially Black femininity was being asked to go into the world. And so I started thinking not only about how to bring the sound aspect of what I was thinking about forward. So that required me to think through how performance was going to come into the project. And that has ended up being like incredibly fruitful for me and kind of mind-blowing, all the various ways in which collaboration and sounds and movement can kind of come into the space of the work I do, which is poetry. It's primarily poetry. And of course, then, the critical work that always is going alongside the sort of, language art of writing poetry. It's just been really hard trying to articulate some of these issues. And I guess what I'm going to do, like, finally, is just read a little bit, just a tiny, tiny sample of the kinds of conclusions that I've sort of been pushing towards as I, finished On Being the Other Woman, or On Being the Other Woman. The last poems were written in late 2020 or maybe early 2021. And the critical writing really began in 2021. So it's like not stopped. And in some ways it's disturbing because I sort of wish the music would leave me alone or let me go or something, but it has not. And it's only now that the critical writing, I think.
I just want to point out that like what we're listening to is a complete exercise in narcissism on her behalf, because it's like there's something very narcissistic. And listen, man, I'm a creative, I'm a writer. I understand there being like something inside of you that you need to get out. I understand expressing yourself creatively. I understand all those things. I really, really do. But there is something to me that is really narcissistic about using a lecture at a university to talk about your feelings about what you're writing. Like in a way that maybe I'm not articulating this properly. Maybe that was the point. Maybe people knew that's what they were signing up for. But it's kind of like, I think that art on some level, and I include writing in that, I include poetry in that, like whatever, it needs to be able to speak for itself. And while I do think there's some value in like understanding the process that someone went through to write it, it's like when it becomes a story that's all about you, then you aren't allowing it to breathe. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Is coming to an end as I've sort of made this 75 or so page manuscript, this essay, which I think,
Oh, she wrote the 75-page poem.
Yeah, it says the things that I've been thinking about.
Okay.
So, here's a little taste of that. I'm not even gonna explain it. I'm just gonna read a little bit. This is like page 69. So I want to experimentally suspend my ongoing paranoid argument with myself regarding the question of whether the Black radical tradition has embedded within it a historically contingent politics of desegregation, which has been displaced, in order to grant that desegregation may figuratively or imagely cover not only the project of dismantling Jim Crow, but a wide range of abolitionist adventures, back to the first one, also towards some forms of Black living that can only be understood as willing entanglement with the violent stuff of which Blackness
Do you guys
is
just want to
made,
watch Sophie?
not rejection.
Should I fast forward through the Black poetry? I don't want to be disrespectful, but Sophie really is the main show. If you guys want to listen to Black poetry, I wasn't aware that she was going to read poetry for half an hour. Okay, let's fast forward. We're going to Sophie. I'm sorry. What is her name? I'm sorry, Simone. I'm sure your work is fabulous. I actually don't think she seems like a bad person, if I'm honest about it. I just am more. There she is. I'm just more interested in Sophie than I am in Simone today.
Musical aesthetics and how they index contemporary conditions of the social and performance and sound in your poetry. It's really wonderful to hear from you. Sophie, I'll bring you up so we can hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Simone, for doing this with me. That was beautiful.
Beautiful, Simone. Beautiful.
I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes on my previous book, the one before this one, as a way of introducing you to it. So it was called Full Surrogacy Now, not because it was interested in so-called third-party pregnancy arrangements.
Sure, Sophie.
Thought of.
Sure, Sophie.
But rather because I precisely wanted to question the naturalized differences between so-called surrogacy.
So despite what Sophie might be saying now, the reality is that these people believe in collectivized care. Can anyone define for me what Sophie might mean by collectivized care? So, socialists, communists, Marxists, I use them all, the term colloquially to be all-encompassing of all of these people. They fundamentally believe in the abolition of private property. That is the number one goal, the abolition of all private property. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Private property includes your home, your car, your business, any sort of buildings. If you're a landlord, it includes that. They don't want you to do that. It also includes your children. These people, and people in the chat are getting it exactly. Exactly. Children are property. Children are property. The state owns your children. They perceive children to be the private property of their parents, and they want to abolish all private property. And what Sophie is going to argue is they want to transfer the responsibility of care, because they view being a mother as doing unpaid emotional labor to raise the next generation of workers, and they want to transition the care for the next generation of workers from the private nuclear family into the public sphere to have the collective raise all the children. And this also, Sin is correct. This includes elder care as well. They do not believe in private care. So while Sophie is arguing, no, when I called my book Full Surrogacy Now, I didn't really mean surrogacy, even though, by the way, the introduction to Sophie's book, which I did actually read, it basically talks about how dangerous it is for women to have their own children, and how it's like a life-threatening exercise for women to have their own children. And that's one of the reasons why women really shouldn't have their own children. Not kidding about that. So don't believe Sophie when she says that. That's just because Sophie's gotten critical feedback and now she's trying to cover her ass. What you need to know is they do want to get rid of your parental rights, and they want children to be raised by the state, which is something that we would see in Brave New World or Logan's Run or The Giver. They were trying to do it in 1984 with ArtSem. Okay, this is a very clear dystopian theme. They want to make it real life. Right, exactly. The collective always means the state. Exactly.
Pregnancies and so-called non-surrogacy or normal pregnancies, and to link that naturalization to capitalism, specifically.
Thank you, Rottweiler. Appreciate it.
Property regime. I was speculating that the meaning of the word surrogacy couldn't really survive in a world where private property had been abolished.
Ding.
In academia, I noticed criticisms of the commercial gestational surrogacy industry, which are, very easy and necessary to make, and they are criticisms I often don't dispute. Right? Indeed, I think I deepen them in some ways in this book. But the standard criticisms were not asking the question, compared to what? They were abandoning all criticality vis-a-vis quote unquote normal baby making. So I wanted to link the rich history of radical critique of the private household, usually the private nuclear household, that is to say the family, as a gestational workplace, with this kind of newly exceptionalized and high profile politics.
A gestational workplace. She perceives the nuclear family as the gestational workplace. This is what, when they say social reproduction theory, and again, if you're interested in more information on this, and I do need to make some clips of the last Socialism Saturday we did on this, when they say social reproduction theory, they are literally talking about the birthing of the workers. Social reproduction theory means having babies. That's what it means. And then they're saying that it is unfair to parents, to biological parents, because they have to do the unpaid labor of raising the children when all the children are our future workers to support society. It's all unpaid labor, and it's incredibly unfair to put that burden on parents. That's what they mean by gestational labor.
Of procreative assistance. One of the thoughts I had earliest in this process was the thought,
That's a good idea,
all
Clues. I'll think
reproduction
about
is
that.
assisted, surely, although assistance can come in quite utopian and dystopian ways. I sort of described the deeply dystopian sense in which our social reproduction under capitalism has been built on surrogacy. So
Did you hear that? She says that our current system is dystopian. Their system is, remember, in the world of the Marxists, their system is going to be a perfect utopia. What we're currently living in right now, very dystopian for them.
you know, Angela Davis was quick to point out in the 80s when newspapers wanted to talk about the quote unquote new reproductive technologies, that they were anything but new in terms of their underlying relations of race and gendered class. Captive mothers on slave plantations were automatically surrogates, she said, because Blackness in the North American settler colonies was cast outside of the symbolic order of gendered humanness.
Hang on, I want to point something out in the chat because Tracy's making a really good point. They can't imagine anyone actually being enjoying being parents, I guess. I'll tell you this. And again, I say this because I have read Sophie's books. Sophie has daddy issues. Sophie has big time daddy issues. Sophie wrote in her book that if she hadn't been her father's biological daughter, that he never would have taken care of her. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess there's probably some truth to that, but it was obviously like a very sore spot of hers. Like, she obviously does not have like a good and because Sophie's whole thesis is we shouldn't just care for people because they're our biological kin, right? We should have our families of choice. Because her father, she didn't have a good relationship with her father. Her father screwed her up, as our parents are prone to do. Every parent screws up their children to greater or lesser degrees, even if they mean well. And so Sophie is essentially living out all of her daddy issues on the world stage. I mean, listen, man, I didn't have a great relationship with my parents either, so I understand hurt people hurt people. I'm not making fun of Sophie for this. I'm just saying that I didn't become a socialist arguing for the abolition of the biological family. Like, this is what should have been worked out in therapy, Sophie. We all have our baggage. I get it. You don't need to abolish the nuclear family just because daddy didn't love you like you thought he should.
And therefore, outside of propertarian parentality.
Exactly. We all have problems.
And this is why some voices within Black philosophy, many of them already mentioned by Simone, and indeed Simone herself, have referred to the phrase the Black family as an oxymoron, not because the family should be a measuring stick to people's care for one another, but because the family as a sanctioned circle of authorized privacy into which the state is not permitted to tread simply has not existed in Black communities, generally speaking, in this country. Its boundaries can always be violated by the state with impunity. So that's basically the contours of the dystopian sense of surrogacy. Care has been systematically privatized and surrogated on a global scale, including via immigrant economies of care labor, which is what some theorists have called reproductive stratification, or the new reproductive division of labor.
By the way, I just want to mention really quickly, this lecture was given in February of this year. So I think this is actually the most current lecture that we've watched from Sophie. We watch everything Sophie does. I'm serious when I say we're Sophie fangirls on this channel. We have watched like every single lecture I can find that Sophie has done on the internet. And I'm fairly certain this is the most recent one. So I would suspect that this reflects her current thinking.
But as mentioned, or as you may know, or as you may have intuited, I was also interested in a critically utopian valence of the phrase full surrogacy now, where the phrase operates in a prescriptive rather than a descriptive sense. And by that, I basically meant abolish the family.
So let's read some of the things that she has on the screen here, because I don't know if she's going to read them. All reproduction is assisted. I bet that says, but we don't learn to act like it or something like that. Children are no one's possessions of property, nor extensions of anyone's self. That's Sophie's way of saying we want to get rid of your parental rights because your children are not your property. Okay? Next up, the communization of care can be imagined in terms of the impossibility of the concept of surrogacy in the context where private property has been abolished. Again, when she says private property has been abolished, what she means in this context is parental rights have been abolished, and therefore we need to communize care where the community is in charge of the care of the children, the community in this case being, you guessed it, the state. The contemporary gestational industry harbors possible openings for solidarity between paid and unpaid gestators. Okay, this is a big sentence. Let's break it down. The contemporary gestational industry is going to be like people who like it's going to be like surrogacy. I think it's also going to be like people who probably are like helping the birthing process, like doulas and things like that, I would imagine. Harbors possible openings for solidarity. Solidarity means allyship, working together between paid and unpaid gestators. What's another word for gestator? What is another word for gestator? Would that be mother? Yes, that's what they mean. Paid, like paid surrogates or unpaid surrogates, mothers, like whatever. Because paid or unpaid human gestational labor means having children, is work under capitalism that gestators themselves might seek to redistribute, reorganize, reduce, or even abolish, steal back from capitalism. Is everyone following? All right, let's listen.
One day had managed to build a world in which children are not conceptualized as possessions, not conceptualized as extensions of the self, a world in which we have learned not just to be the makers of one another, but also to organize our lives as though that were true.
Oh,
not just to be.
Hang on, I missed a super chat. My bad. I was reading a list. My bad, Rottweiler. Thank you. It seems like a pattern. All of the Socialist Saturday lectures seem to be narcissistic by some sort of trauma. Some of them seem to be seek destabilizing the system that failed them in their eyes. Of course it is. Of course it is. Because there are two types of people in the world. There are creators and there are destroyers. And when you're destroying something, which they are seeking to do, in their destabilization of the system, they're fundamentally seeking to destroy or upheave the entire system. They're doing it because hurt people. Something has happened to them. They lack the self-worth to believe that they can actually be individuals that achieve things through meritocracy and things like that. And so instead of being creators, giving something to the world, they seek to destroy the world because they think it's the only way to actually, be happy, etc., 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 etc. But yeah, exactly, Rottweiler. I think this is a really good observation.
Because of one another, but to act like it as classless equals and comradely strangers, then there would be no surrogacy. Or alternatively, one might say there would be nothing but surrogacy. There'd be a lot more surrogacy. Instead of laborers being outsourced by their proper owner, there would be something like a baseline of copyleft, anti-proprietary, mutual care laborers with no private source of legal authorization, such as the present exclusive institutions of motherhood or fatherhood. Okay, so the new book is very short, sort of pamphlet length, and it is more accessibly written. So it is also, as you heard, about the communization of care, but it came out of a PhD the previous book came out of a PhD in academic human geography, whereas this book comes from a sort of a new phase of my creativity, which is sort of a para-academic writer existence. So this manifesto, sprang from a lot of requests for clarification of the family abolitionist component in Full Surrogacy Now. So Abolish the Family seeks to make a persuasive argument for the positive supersession of the private household. It defines the family as the form that care privatization takes in a class society. It proceeds in 4 steps. First, addressing the psychic pain and distress that many people, in fact, probably almost all of us.
So here's what happened. Sophie wrote her first book, which was based on her university dissertation called Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family. And Sophie got some feedback on that book. And the feedback was, Sophie, I like my family. I don't want to abolish it. Because Sophie had a shitty childhood and has unresolved daddy issues that she hasn't worked out in therapy. Sophie made, when she wrote her dissertation, the assumption that everyone didn't like their family. And so now Sophie has to do a little bit of backtracking because she found out that society is, well, not quite ready for her ideas yet. And she had to be like, it's okay to love your family, but wouldn't it be better if the care for grandma was provided by someone else and you didn't have to do the labor of caring for grandma? Honestly, it would be better for grandma all around if the care was collectivized. Same with the kids. Wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to do the labor of raising the children? Because that's unpaid labor in support of capitalism. And it's not that we don't want, children to exist. We just want other people to raise them for you. Wouldn't that be nice?
Of us experience in the face of the phrase family abolition, even if we have heard of the phrase, which many of us, despite the phrase's fairly significant history, have not, right? Secondly, it answers head on the, to my mind, most valid and important line of objection to the politics of family abolitionism, namely the demand that non-white households and non-Western, working class, migrant, queer and or indigenous households should be excluded from the definition of the family in play. And thirdly, it provides a whistle-stop overview of the groups, movements, and individuals who have for over 2 centuries theorized and dreamed about abolishing the family.
So the argument, hang on,
there's also,
I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure the argument that Sophie just made is that all non-white people would be totally on board with abolishing the family. I don't even know what you guys are talking about. In fact, it's kind of racist to not consider abolition of the family. You're probably white if you don't want this. Why might Sophie say that? Because the terms whiteness and capitalism are used interchangeably by these people. Whiteness does not mean your skin color. It means capitalism, the bourgeois, the private property owners, the people who own the power structure, things like that. And so it would be totally natural for Sophie to make the assumption that all non-white people are maybe a little bit more open to this idea because that's what's going to be in her head. Probably because Sophie, I'm going to guess, doesn't actually have a lot of Black friends. And Sophie's probably really unaware that if you try to abolish the family in Black communities, that's not going to work for a lot of them. It's not going to work. I'm sorry. It's not going to work. Despite, we can make the argument about like absentee or Hispanic communities for that matter. Like you can make the argument about absentee fathers all you want in the Black community, and there's something to be said there. However, I think those of us who do actually, know Black people know that the family structure, though it might not always be traditional, is actually pretty important in those communities and in many communities, like Italian communities. Come on. Although they do consider Italians to be white or white people of color.
a kind of conclusion that argues that our metaphors around kinship could perhaps be generatively chained up, and sort of questioning the usefulness of kin as the container for all of our most sort of pressing intimacies and desires. As Tiffany Latagbo King says, there are other ways of naming each other as relations. Perhaps we could experiment more energetically with those. But yeah, the history includes a strand that operated, so to speak, within the house of the family, and a strand that operated sort of without, from the outside. So on the one hand, I look at utopian feminists, gay liberationists, sort of anti-work communist housewives, and children's liberationists who wanted to explode the private-public distinction at the heart of patriarchy and capitalism, and build instead cities for friends, cities without private kitchens, cities full of infrastructures of common.
Cities without private kitchens. Did everyone hear that? Sophie dreams of a utopia in which we build cities without private kitchens. Let's just listen to that again, and I just want you to chat in. Where have we heard getting rid of things in your kitchen before? Let's just rewind real quick.
And build instead cities for friends, cities without private kitchens,
cities without private kitchens. Wasn't it not too long ago that Joe Biden argued for getting rid of gas stoves? Sophie's talked about this in other places. I have Sophie on video talking about this more elaborately. You can actually find the clip. I made a clip of it somewhere on the channel. Essentially, Sophie wants to create a utopia in which you have no need for a private kitchen. You guys know those 15-minute cities that they're building? The whole idea of a 15-minute city is you will be within a 15-minute walk or bike ride or public transportation to like everything you need. So think about those ideas of like the 15-minute cities that they are building right now. And then think about the idea that Joe Biden wanted you to get rid of your gas stoves. And then think about the idea that Sophie has multiple times lectured about the fact that people shouldn't need a private kitchen at all because the food will be prepared communally in the communal area where everyone in the 15-minute city, she doesn't use that word specifically, but I'm positing, where everyone in the 15-minute city will just be able to go down to the communal area and get their food, because all food is going to be provided by the state and prepared for by the workers assigned to prepare the food by the state. So you will have no need to have a private kitchen. You won't need a stove. You won't need a refrigerator. You won't need a microwave. You won't need an oven. You won't need any of that stuff because the state is going to take care of everything. That's what she means by that.
He's full of infrastructures of common nurturance. And then on the other hand, I looked at a history of fugitive, colonized, sterilized, sexually persecuted, criminalized, incarcerated, welfare dependent, and maroon communities. Notably in examples I look at in the United States, who sought to destroy via resistance and evasion the systems of settler sexuality, capitalist familism, and proprietarian householding imposed on them by the state, right? As I say, the last step looks at the meanings of kinship, but starts by thinking about the polysemic nature of the word abolish, or the trickiness of that word in this context, but
look,
insisting
comrades
that it is
against
the right
kinship
one in the end. Abolish is a word that comprises destruction and negation, but also preservation, transformation, and actualization. So I compare the task of building realizing and proliferating the infrastructures of care in the world, predicated on our common need to be known, held, dare I say, loved, with the task of building a world of real justice in the context of, the better known abolitionism of our present time, which concerns the criminal justice system. So I ask, by analogy, to Ruth Wilson Gilmore, what would it mean to not need the family? Because as prison and police abolitionists like Gilmore argue, abolition is not achieved when one burns down all the police stations and the prisons, although that element of destruction is certainly likely to be part of the process. Abolition is only achieved when the kernel of need on which the current infrastructure rests, namely, in that case, justice, when it has been taken up and made real for the first time in history, made real in the context of a world in which true justice prevails, the very idea of prison has become a strange, distant memory, or indeed unthinkable. So in that sense, one does not replace something which one wants to abolish, right? The family abolitionists, Michelle Barrett and Mary McIntosh, put this point really clearly. They did not want to put something in the place of the family. It makes no sense to replace a system of organized scarcity, even if it feels incredibly scary to imagine living in a society in which the ideological...
Why do they believe that the family is organized scarcity? Pop quiz for the chat. Why does Sophie believe that the family is organized scarcity? Any ideas? I know there's a slight delay in the chat. So I would posit that they believe that the family is organized scarcity because when you are in the private family, you only have access to the resources of the private family that you are born into. Whereas if care is communized, if care is collectivized, then you have access to everyone's resources because you have access to the state's resources. But as long, and this is the, guys, these are the arguments that they're going to make to get rid of parental rights. I hope you guys understand that. As long as parental rights stand, then children are unfairly restricted based on the means and resources of their biological family, which is basically a chance of birth. Whereas if the community or the collective is responsible for the care, then everyone has access to everything and there's going to be no more scarcity because there's no more limitations placed on you based on who your parents happen to be. Doesn't that actually sound kind of appealing? And this is the problem. Because these people are very good at making arguments that are going to sound appealing. But that doesn't mean they're going to work out in the utopian fashion that these people are thinking of, because what they're not doing is saying, what could go wrong with this idea? And there are so many things that could go wrong with that idea. My husband was raised in the USSR before the USSR fell. My husband knows exactly what can go wrong with this idea. It involves standing in line to get bread.
Juridical and material container of biogenetic kinship is not present. It's super scary for many people to imagine the absence of the familial containers we use to sustain the illusion that our cared forness is not contingent on labor, the choice to care every day, that instead it is made automatic by nature, by God, or by the sanction of the state. But it can also be, especially for some of us.
By the way, these people also believe that they want to abolish the state. So Sophie's going to talk about the state as though she wants to abolish the state, which as an anarchist, I somewhat appreciate, right? However, what Sophie means when she says abolish the state or like talks about the state in a negative way is not that she wants to get rid of government, is not that she wants to get rid of the state, it's that she wants to be the state. Does everyone see that difference? What she thinks it's a dictatorship of the proletariat, right? What they mean is Sophie wants to get rid of the bourgeois. She wants the proletariat to rise up and take power, just like they did in China in the Cultural Revolution. And so basically, she doesn't want to get rid of the state. She wants to replace the bourgeois with the proletariat. She wants to be in charge. What Sophie doesn't realize is that she's going to be one of the first against the wall. Define proletariat, worker. Bourgeois, boss. Proletariat, worker. Are you satisfied?
And I suppose that is a differentially distributed availability. Pretty exciting, inspiring, and even a comforting thought to realize, that there is a long history of, refuge making for, refugees of the private nuclear household and the family. It can be kind of comforting to some people to realize that the very origin of the word feminism is bound up with the dream of non-familial life, right? This does not tend to be included on lists of sort of famous historic girl bosses, but family abolition and feminism is in a way, they were invented as one.
I love this.
Guy,
hang on. SG, would you be offended if I put this on a t-shirt? Like anyone else can put it on a t-shirt too. But like, would you be offended if I stole this line and made a t-shirt out of it? Because that's a really effing good line. And I want to put it on a t-shirt that people can wear. Yes, communism where people need to kill stray dogs to eat. Exactly.
Charles Fourier kind of is behind the coining of the word feminism. He drew up blueprints for a post-work city that would, inspire large groups of people all over the world.
Thank you, SG. I
appreciate
appreciate it.
To try and implement and develop his peculiar, kinky designs.
Kinky. How is this
It
kinky?
can be intensely affecting for some of us, by the same token, to recognize that family abolition, albeit marginalized within the history of communism, is in a sense orthodox Marxism. And it was seriously on the table for a moment when the dissident left Bolshevik Alexandra Kollontai, at the helm of the brand new revolutionary state, planned to socialize child rearing, even though she was immediately suppressed, and the Soviet experiment became a disaster.
Did they call the Soviet state the revolutionary state? Yeah, that revolutionary state led to a lot of starvation and suffering, didn't it, Sophie?
And instead, he was convinced in theory, but in practice, he would prefer if the family was abolished much later on. 50 years after Kollontai's brief moment, her brief moment in real power, before which she served for another 50 years, surviving Stalin. There was Shulamith Firestone and her women's liberationist comrades theorizing the communization of care, the liberation of children, and the elimination of the sex distinction itself in New York. Gay liberation fronts, groups throughout North America, the UK and Europe identified the family in the 70s as the cell of capitalism's social tissue, and experimented with anti-patriarchal childcare collectives. And anti-imperialist and revolutionary Black feminists propagandized.
They're not Stalinists, they're Maoists. Rottweiler, do you want to tell us more about why you say that? I believe this is true, but like, tell us more. You don't have to send in a super chat or anything. I'll just look for your chat in the actual chat. Thank you. Rottweiler is such a wealth of information. Oh, Cecil got a bingo. Congratulations. Or Cecile.
Against the family as an elemental component of white supremacist state rule. Throughout the 70s and 80s, welfare radicals, disability liberationists, militant housewives against housework and work as a whole sought together to explode the basis of, economic productivity on the one hand and or maternalist respectability on the other, on which the whole system of state support to proletarian households sort of rests ideologically. Fuck you, pay us, I believe, is the general gist. So it was these groups who insisted that the family really means, the family, because, as the philosopher Kathy Weeks has paraphrased, the model of the nuclear family that has served subordinated groups as a fence against the state, society, and capital is the very same white, settler, bourgeois, heterosexual, and patriarchal institution that was imposed by the state, society, and capital on the formerly enslaved indigenous
Oh my God. Hang on, I'll let her finish reading.
peoples and waves of immigrants, all of whom continue to be at once in need of its meager protections and marginalized by its legacies and prescriptions.
All right, I just want to take a moment with what Sophie just read. I want to read what Rottweiler said, though, about Stalinism versus Maoism. Stalin didn't start a cultural revolution like Mao. Remember, Mao started with the identitarian movement, red versus black. These people are replicating Mao's cultural revolution. Awesome, Rottweiler. Thank you for that clarification. Like, I just think like Rottweiler has such a talent for like drilling things down into like really easy to understand explanations. So valuable. Really glad you're part of the community, Rottweiler. All right, let's think about this. So what Sophie is saying here is that the nuclear family is basically a structure to support capitalism, which, remember, capitalism and whiteness are the same thing, which is why she's saying in the very same white settler, bourgeois, heterosexual, patriarchal institution, it's not about skin color. It's about people who are engaging in capitalism. Okay? White, bourgeois, property owner, and what they really mean when they say capitalism is private property owners. So what she's saying is that the nuclear family as a unit was forced onto Black people. That's what they mean when they say enslaved, indigenous, and immigrants, because capitalism forced Black people, indigenous, and immigrants into the nuclear families in order to survive. She pretends, of course, that the nuclear family hasn't always existed throughout all of history, because that would be inconvenient to the argument. Everyone understand?
So, as such, it can be liberating to realize that Margaret Thatcher's statement, there is no such thing as society, there are individual men and women and there are families, is correct, but only insofar as the family is the mechanism whereby the social is eaten away. This is Barrett and McIntosh's argument, right, in The Antisocial Family. They suggested in this book, which is from 1982, that politically the left can in fact resist capitalism's pressure on all of us to have our needs met exclusively in the private sphere, right? Be that commercially or not.
Hang on. I fail to see how white, middle, and upper class self-proclaimed socialists of today would not be okay with owning private property. They don't consider like So they believe that all of their needs are going to be provided for by the state. So they believe they're going to have a place to live, and that place to live is going to be better than the place they have now. They believe that they're going to be provided with all of the resources they need. They believe that they're going to have the cushy, and this is really the most important thing. Why do upper class people go along with this? Because they think they're going to be the party. Like in 1984. Who had access to the privileges, the wine, the TV you could turn off in 1984, the party? The upper class people, the upper class people that support this stuff think they are the ones who are going to be running it. Of course they're not. They're going to be assigned to work out in the field like everyone else, and they're not going to want to do that. They're going to be really disappointed. The middle class people probably believe that it's going to be like a better situation than what they have now, but these people do not believe that the middle class exists. So, and again, we're talking about the farthest left of the far left here. They do not believe the middle class exists. They believe the bourgeois, the rich, and the proletariat, the poor, those are the two classes. Okay. And so middle class is not even going to factor into this equation. Most of the people that we watch that are on socialism are rich, white people that like maybe they themselves aren't rich. They come from wealthy white families. They come from like aristocratic families. They come from society's elite. They're the guilty white liberals, okay? But they really do think they're going to be the upper crust. That's why they go along with it. Exactly. They don't. Real socialism has never been tried, Sarah. They're going to do it right this time. Pinky swear, bro.
Non-commercially, in ways directly or only indirectly mediated by the market, i.e. by our moms and wives, and Instagram life coaches, or via Instacart shoppers, professional cleaners, masseuses, therapists, and so on. Too many of our institutions reinscribe the naturalness and desirability of the private nuclear household, even as our novels, TV shows, movies, jokes, and memes evoke a kind of satirical common sense knowledge that families are disappointing, frustrating, annoying at best, and dramatically disruptive at worst. States, for example, incentivize marriage and property ownership and typically recognize only 2 parents per child. Social work typically carries a racist bias towards bourgeois or aspirationally bourgeois familiality. And mental health care often departs from the unstated premise that smoothing out the functioning of a family is an intrinsically desirable outcome. I'm interested in asking, can we envisage instead, forms of care that incline towards the question, what would it mean to not need the family? I wrote down earlier when Simone asked what happens to the heart when no support is available. I mean, I paraphrase here, but this is in fact, I think, the same question that I'm fundamentally asking when I suggest in language I understand is difficult and provocative to all of us, abolish the family. Okay, thank you.
Sophie, thanks so much for that really rich overview. I am so thrilled to hear from the two of you.
Yes, we are thrilled as well.
Discussion. So I'll let you take it away, but let me know when you'd like to take some questions from the audience and we can let folks jump in.
Hey, Autumn, no. You cannot block my moderators, Autumn. Autumn, if you block my moderators, I'm blocking you.
Can you hear me, Sophie?
Yes.
Okay. How shall we begin? I would like to just note that your mark for additional commentary is a heart. And your bullet points are hearts, which I really loved and seemed perfect. And also, why didn't anyone ever think of this before? But so I do want to talk a little bit about the sentence maybe that you just paraphrased, which is what happens to the heart when no support is available. Because in some ways, I am struggling with exactly the same questions that Abolish the Family raises, albeit in a slightly different cultural context and in a critical context that I would call poetics rather than philosophy or sociology or anything like that. The question of the commons is one which in some ways motivates this project. The question of whether what has been commonly described as Black social life, or also sometimes as fugitivity or waywardness, can account for the various ways in which this amazing thing, which happens in your book, so often happens. That is, that those who opt for alternative forms of life outside the sanctioned care structures, or who simply refuse to even participate in the discourse and acknowledge the state of war that they are inevitably, forced to live in. That is all of us, right?
Hang on. Mark, the Jew shit is going to stop in the chat. I'm putting you in a timeout now. I don't want to see any more Jew shit in the chat. You are distracting from the discussion that's going on. It is unnecessary. It's unproductive. And quite frankly, your chats don't even make sense in the first place. And so no one actually understands what you're saying. But I don't want to see it in the chat. If you have something productive to contribute, you can do that. But I'm not going to have the spamming of the chat with things that are irrelevant.
Alone, without the structures of care and support that utopian visions of a reorganized revolutionary society would create. And thus, Shuli died alone in her apartment. And in a way, this is on your page 61, and in a way, it's exactly that ending that propels my struggle with what people, what the music writers call toxic masculinity in this music.
No,
because
music writers believe in toxic masculinity. I'm sorry.
It seems to me there's a crux of truth in the exploration of the harms of patriarchy that seem to me to be creatively productive and interesting to look at.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate this this rich comment, which makes me kind of realize, so a couple of times that same sort of historic fact about, Firestone dying alone in her apartment, in fact, dying unnoticed, laying there long enough that she began to smell, is actually raised in this way to discredit the project. You're doing this very differently, and it's helped me see how, how dismissive and defensive I can sometimes be when it comes to figures like my problematic faves, like her. I mean, so to say something about her, wow, clearly she needed a family. It's not,
that's
it's not, yeah. but no, exactly. Yeah, there is something to be said for the meditation on like things that are worse than family that are imaginable. I mean, that there is something that comes about when you start talking about this terrain, which instantly brings people's imagination to, you know, the worst possible apocalyptic scenarios. We like to imagine as well, constantly in our, you know, blockbuster type cinema, the very conditions that would make, you know, that would make family just the, you know, utterly necessary, you know, unquestioned, you know, we love to make apocalyptic landscapes where the very kind of the pared down unit of the sort of settler family, like the father and the mother and the child, or perhaps the mother dies, or perhaps the father dies, or whatever. But there's a kind of pared down biogenetic unit that is what we imagine at the end of the world in a white supremacist bourgeois like art culture, I think.
Yeah, it's the Cormac McCarthy, the road culture.
Exactly, yeah. But sometimes when you kind of notice all of that stuff, it's easy to kind of forget to, you know, to think through there are worse alternatives than the family. I think that's true, you know. I think people could be warehoused in.
Hang on. Fender Ben has a actually really interesting comment. Is patriarchy synonymous with capitalism like whiteness? Not exactly. Patriarchy is more about like the gender binary stuff. I don't believe that I've heard patriarchy is one of the reasons that they're going to give for wanting to abolish the gender binary. It's a tool utilizing gender to create destabilizing opportunities for the binary, but I've never heard it be used interchangeably with capitalism in the same way that whiteness is used interchangeably with the word capitalism. Now, that being said, the reason that they're going to give for wanting to abolish the gender binary is because the gender binary upholds capitalism. So you could make like a tangential argument that that's the case, but I wouldn't classify it as such. Though I reserve the right to rethink that at a later time when I'm doing it not off the cuff. Mark, you and I are going to have a little chat. As I have already explained, 19 Ways from Sunday, whiteness, white supremacy has nothing to do with your skin color, Mark. And so if you're going to come in to my chat with a whole bunch of racist bullshit, you are not going to last here. Whiteness does not mean your skin color. Whiteness means capitalism. And every single time you racists pull this bullshit, you are allowing them to win. You are supporting them, which makes sense, Mark, because racists are collectivists. Socialists are collectivists. Identitarians like you, Mark, are also collectivists. So you guys actually have more in common with people like Sophie Lewis than you have in common with people like me. So no more racist bullshit in the chat. Next time you're going to get banned, jackass.
Increasingly, the way that certain kind of workers for Amazon in Eastern Europe are, you know, dormitory warehousing, you know, is an emergent form of social reproduction. You know, I'm also constantly trying to be sufficiently agile to recognize that for many humans, you know, inclusion in the human, inclusion in familiality, inclusion in it's so recent that, you know, that there can be a, it's difficult to find a language in which to recognize the sort of the uneven distribution of the kind of the pain. I think you're also talking about braided with pleasure in the history of, you know, survival, survivance. Like, it's a complex thing that both you know, both the sort of, you know, the demand for familial recognition and the rejection of family as a horizon is in sort of liberationist histories. You know, for workers' struggles, it was a bit of a victory in you know, in Europe, talking about the kind of, you know, labor victories that brought about state recognition of proletarian households and marriages. This was a sort of great advance, you know, for certain kind of leftist platforms. At the same time, it threw all these kind of queer and sex working and colonized sorts of bodies under the bus. But we're still in that place of being like, you know, we like, if you were to take away the family somehow, like, you know, people would die en masse. It'd be a nightmare. You know, there can be.
Yeah, some people would die en masse, but I guess, I mean, you know, children. I want to put aside the question of like children and those who are unable to care for themselves, and sort of think about. I mean, I'll tell us an anecdote that sort of like can bring our sort of positions.
I just want to make a comment on the luxury that these people are sitting in, because I know that Sophie considers herself part of the proletariat. I would bet, I don't know anything about Simone. I have never seen Simone before. Simone to me seems like an autist. And I don't say that with any disrespect. I totally get it because I'm kind of like an artist too, all right? I understand this like dreamy kind of like creative like world where you want to live in esoterics and think big. I totally get it because sometimes I live in that world too, and that world is great. So I'm not shitting on her because of that. But like I would venture a guess, and I could be wrong, that Simone might also consider herself to be part of the proletariat. However, the fact that Sophie and Simone are able to just take time out of their day to think grand esoteric thoughts about the nature of life and creativity and the meaning of all these things and write 75-page poems and think about like, you know, the breaking on all this stuff. It's like all very dreamy and da 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 da. It is a life of such privilege. This is their job. This is the world they live in, where they get to think the big ideas and blah 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 blah. And as Kurt accurately says, college professors are called the ivory tower for a reason. These are not people who are hinged into reality. These are not people who exist in the real world. And that's why this is partially like I honestly like I don't even blame Sophie for this on some levels, because Sophie lives in a land of theory. Sophie's ideas are probably never going to be tested in the real world. Maybe I'm wrong. But like the reason their ideas sound so crazy is because they do not have experience in reality. What that means, there's both a good and the bad to that. The good is, are these ideas ever actually going to get implemented? Probably not. But the bad is that these ideas are influencing the direction of the Democratic Party. And we know that because we can hear them parroting the same talking points of these people years later. So what happens is you have these people having these airy discussions about, you know, love and life and creativity and art and all these things. And these all happen in the universities. And then these crazy ideas that are not grounded in reality at all, because they're had by privileged people who have the time to sit back and, you know, think about these grand ideas. These ideas trickle down into society in a way that is still unhinged from reality, which is why real socialism has never been tried. Because real socialism is a theory. Socialism is not a practical reality. It is a theory that will always and perpetually be implemented incorrectly because it is not designed to exist in the land of reality.
I think closer together, which is that I was talking to my therapist who we were having a conversation about certain kinds of gender roles and questions of coupledom and sort of common sense understandings of what it means to be married or something like that. And she said, "Oh, like you don't really have." I said, "I don't really know what you're talking about." And she said, "Oh, like you don't have a way of understanding something like infidelity." And I said, "I'm Black." And she said, we laughed. She's funny, and so but I meant that, like I really meant it. That there is a way in which, and you detail this in your as you said, your, what do you call it, the great title of your chapter, which is like a potted history, right, of abolitionism. You talk a lot, you give a clear summary of how it is that Black people, particularly who in post-slavery societies, really don't have the same sense of what it means to achieve bourgeois familiality or something like that, because there are retained aspects of exclusion from that form of the
Exactly,
family
Brooklyn Way.
that maybe will never, ever, in my expectation, will never go away. That there is always a certain amount of flux in familial relations among the Black people that I have known, and in my own understanding of what it means to know those norms. And so I guess in a way, when I say something like, "Oh, we want to avoid throwing folks under the bus who refuse the couple form, who refuse the family," and how can we think though about the networks of the existing networks, right? We're exactly on the same page. How can we think about the actual networks that would allow those who are not willing to sell themselves to those structures, right, to a certain degree? How can we increase them in number? Because they are actually so few and far between, in my experience, in the absence of movement, which is, I think, where we are now. Really isolated moment. So that, for example, like I'm not in a couple. I have a small child. I'm from a very like a kind of like upper middle class but non-bourgeois Black family.
Like, do you
And
see how she was so
I
careful to say
find
not bourgeois,
myself often like cathected.
we were upper middle class, but we weren't bourgeois. I swear, we didn't. If they owned their home, then they were bourgeois. By the way, so Simone's kind of like a useful idiot. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if your family owned their home, and if they're an upper middle class family, they probably did own their home. Then you were part of the bourgeois, Simone.
By various forms of family aggression.
Simone, you went to Wesleyan. You went to the most bourgeois of all women's colleges. Like, you went to the most bourgeois college possible. Oh no, I'm thinking of Wellesley. Wesleyan's still fucking bourgeois. Wellesley is like meh. But like Wesleyan is not a women's college. Wesleyan is still effing bourgeois. You went to Wesleyan, Harvard Law School, the new school. Simone, come on. You have like 18 degrees from every bougie college that you can get a degree from. Simone did not hit public school until she got her second PhD from CUNY. And then it was still CUNY.
I don't mean my own family. I mean various structural aggressions that are actually the way in which I have to negotiate all intimacy in my life, right? And yeah, I mean, so for me, it's non-theoretical. It's extremely practical. It's extremely present. It's very much a matter of day-to-day cultivation of ties that, yeah,
Yeah. Part of me wants to ask you a little bit about the sort of the figure of the, you know, the protected child, the child in need of protection, and the sort of the shadow actually existing children, many of whom
Wesleyans
are
in
explicitly
Massachusetts. The
not
Wesleyan
worthy of
town is in
protection
Connecticut.
on
Wesleyan
this
College is in
political
Massachusetts.
stage. I'm really thinking about how this kind
In
of
Western Massachusetts. No, that's
massive
Williams. You're right.
mobilization against.
Fuck, where is Wesleyan? Wesleyan might be in Connecticut. So many W
I don't know if
schools.
you'd agree
Williams
with
is
me
what I'm
in
thinking of in
sort of
Massachusetts.
summarizing
You're
like
right.
this, but
Wesleyan's
sort
in
of
Connecticut.
you know, bodily autonomy really, as
That's
it
the truth.
manifests for gestators, pregnant people who want us to stop being pregnant. For
why are there so many one-word colleges that start with W? Now I'm having to. I confuse Wesleyan and Williams. I'm sorry. My bad. Thank you, Philosophus, for the super chat.
whatever reason or no reason, and you know, children who or youth who want to be you know, socially
They're all bougie
recognized as the sort of
My
people
point
they
remains.
are in terms of gender. And the way that that is braided together with the sort of
Listen, and I know this is off topic. If you went to a college that has a one-word name, it was probably a school that was bougie AF, okay?
sort of book burning kind of anti-critical race theory sort of crusade in terms of public school curricula in this country. Because I do think that when there's a moral panic,
hang on, I just want to point out what Sophie just did, because I know I was joking about college names, but Sophie just like dismissively said, critical race theory, book burning crusade. This is what I told the right was going to happen. Every single time, and I mean every single time the left talks about critical race theory and the uproar against it, what they do is exactly what Sophie just did. This is not just a socialist thing. They go, it's just a book burning crusade. They just want to ban books, et cetera, et cetera. And the right handed this to them on a silver platter. Fucking Moms for Liberty handed them this talking point on a silver platter. This is why the book burning bullshit and the book banning bullshit will inevitably fail and is actually detrimental to the so-called anti-woke movement, because the book banning stuff has nothing to do with critical race theory. The book banning stuff has nothing to do with getting critical race theory out of schools. It has nothing to do with the curriculum. It has nothing to do with any of it. But it will constantly and perpetually be used against anyone on our side, because Moms for Liberty couldn't help themselves chasing after the thing that was going to allow them to raise the most money and, oh, by the way, argue for putting Bibles back in the school at the same time. And I told them this when they started doing it over a year ago. And of course, they were so receptive to that critical feedback that they blocked me and half my community on Twitter, because Moms for Liberty believes in liberty after all. They believe in a free exchange of ideas, except if you disagree with Moms for Liberty and their book banning fucking crusade that has no hope of working ever at all. Book banning is like trying to kill a hydra by cutting off one head. 2 more will grow in its place. That is exactly and perpetually correct.
As we saw in the 80s, exactly the same things were said about children, and you know, the contagiousness of gayness, as is being said now about transness, as though contagion or seduction were sort of in and of themselves bad things, or like, you know.
Jules says in the chat, I have read Rules for Radicals. My husband has too. That's great, Jules. I'm actually working on an article for my Substack, carlin.substack.com, link in the description below, specifically about Rules for Radicals. It should be up tonight. I was hoping to get it up last night. I fell asleep, like whatever. But like I am actually working on an article specifically about Rules for Radicals. And I was thinking about doing another kind of like Rules for Radicals, like book club thing. We actually did a Rules for Radicals book club a while ago, but maybe even just breaking it down a little bit more. I mean, I'm talking like years ago, we did a Rules for Radical book club. Because like Rules for Radicals is the playbook that they're using, and it's really important for people to understand it. So I'm really glad that you've read it, and it's something that I'm writing about, and it is something I'm thinking about a lot too. Jan, Carlin was right super chat, though I agree. See, Jan, you don't have to send me the Carlin is right super chat if you agreed with me. It's only if I'm wrong, I'm right and you're wrong. That's it. But thank you, Jan. I do appreciate it.
Ways that, you know, we somehow, you know, should do without in
Right.
as we become, as we identify what we want to be and become together. It's crazy to think that we could somehow not be, you know, that social forms are not catching, or
Yeah.
or that you can sort of figure out your gender in a vacuum, you know, without seeing someone like yourself. Amazing on its face. But yeah, there is something I think also about the privatization of care at the core of all this. Sorry, to get to my point. Like when we see these kind of morbid symptoms, the sort of white nationalists doing cottagecore trad wifery on the one hand,
Chad
and then the
Whiffery.
sort of liberal center having conniptions and convulsions about like exodus from heterosexuality and like heteropessimism, the implicit whiteness of heteropessimism as well, in its forms, where I think Asa Sarrazin.
Heteropessimism. I was actually looking, like listening to a video about this earlier. Heteropessimism is basically the idea of like being dissatisfied with the straight identity. And I was gonna do a thing about it, but I'm glad Sophie brought it up. Like it's like the white bourgeois is engaging in heteropessimism and are upset that everyone is departing from heterosexuality. It's like it's basically like heterosexualism, or excuse me, heteropessimism is like the entry point into queer Marxism when you get into like heteronormativity and homonormativity and all that bullshit. That's what Sophie is essentially talking about.
And was quite aware of this really, and said so, right? But it's been taken up in a weird way, that concept, like the national culture of complaining about men whilst doing absolutely nothing to about it. you know what I mean? Like taking no pleasure in men, or doing nothing so that pleasure might become possible, or doing nothing to build a different norm, a different culture, a different way of life, but to sort of insist on this kind of almost like I want to say miserabilism, like a sort of thwarted desire, a kind of domestic realism of like, you know, I'm a mom, I do so much work, I do more emotional labor than my male sort of partner or whatever. This kind of this white national discourse that has emerged, I think, to save in a weird way, like the private nuclear household, by imagining that if we were to equalize housework between men and women in the private nuclear household, that would be somehow enough, that would be all we would need to do, right? Sorry, I'm rambling, but
I'm laughing because I'm like, I don't know what white people do at home. Like, I don't.
I suspect that white people at home do chores, and they talk and they help each other and they sit around and they watch TV. Like, is it maybe on a good night they might play a game or have a barbecue? Like, I mean, what do white people do at home? What are you talking about? Why are we assuming, why are we advancing any sort of racist stereotype that like all white people do this and all black people do that? That makes no sense at all. And why is capitalism preventing anyone from sharing chores in the household?
But I think I'm following what you're saying about I mean, I guess I'm thinking first of all about, I want to say two things. One is that at the core of care, I do understand. I think you to be saying something like there is a kind of fallacy at the core of the idea of care, which rests on the image of the defenseless child or something like that. Is that correct? Am I understanding you correctly?
Oh, he doesn't know what Sophie's talking about. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, more or less, I think you are getting me. Yeah, I mean, I think care is a perfectly good concept as long as we qualify it. Like care for what, of what, for
Mhm.
why. You know,
Mhm.
if you just say care, like I don't know what that is. It could be
Mhm.
it could be
Mhm.
care of the wrong things, the wrong social.
Mhm. Yes, I see. I mean, I guess I want to say, I mean, the lawyer in me wants to say something like I want to distinguish between something like infancy and the infinite duration of childhood when we think about care as like an abstract term, which may in fact be indexed by babies. I don't know, like in terms of like the inability of some humans to survive without a certain amount of support, right? Whether it's actual biological support that is being fed and this kind of thing and clothed and sheltered by someone else, or the variety of emotional labors that we have to do to sort of secure the intactness or something like that of a person with not to cause harm to them so that they shatter the and I guess I do recognize those things as separable, you know and also having I've thought a great deal about how this sort of metaphorization or something of care that goes on um in the domestic sphere, right? It's like, yes, I'm a mother, and my son needs a lot of things and has since he was born, right? But there is a trajectory, and those things change. I mean, so the actual care that he needs over the long term, like any human being, is like radically different from 6 months to the next. And so I totally agree with you that our sense of like is of what it is to care for someone probably needs some revision, and also just like better words or something, you know what I mean? Like we need to be able to describe better what we mean by caring for a person at in the moment, right? Like in the moment. And I guess like I love your word. I think you use the word comradeliness. You're talking about friendship, I guess, often, but the sense of comradeliness does seem to be a better word
She
than
doesn't know.
care, which because it's separate.
Simone doesn't know what the word comradely means. Okay, Simone is confused because Simone maybe she might understand in theory what's going on, but she doesn't understand that comrade is a very specific political term that communists use as a badge of honor. That socialists, I mean, this is like a term of honor. And the reason I say that is on one of my socialism Saturdays, we all took a 3-part class in what it means to be a good comrade. And they explained the history of the term comrade and how you get the term comrade bestowed on you, and when the term comrade can be taken away, and what it means to engage in comradeship or comradely behavior. So Simone does not understand this because Simone is probably Mark, I'm sorry, buddy. Like the ship posting is over. I'm done. I warned you several times. You got several chances. I'm done. So what Simone does not understand is that comrade is not interchangeable with care in the way that Sophie is saying it. I say that because Simone's like a useful idiot in this whole discussion. I am sure that Simone is very, very smart. I'm not calling Simone a stupid person. I'm saying that Simone is like, again, she's an autist. She is not fully hinged into what Sophie is saying, and I actually think this is kind of interesting to watch the interactions between Simone and Sophie, because Simone does not understand what Sophie is saying. And it's kind of funny. It's like, it's almost like this is like Sophie trying to have a conversation with like a normal person, as normal as someone in academia can be. Simone's not totally normal, but she's just like, I don't understand these ideas. Like, I have never encountered them before. I have been too busy being an artist. Not an autist, an artist. A-R-T, art.
From this idea of infancy. Just thinking in a basic way about what care can be and how it can be exercised among autonomous individuals, right? Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, I realize now with embarrassment that I think I threw like 7 questions together into my last.
Sophie's like, you just don't understand because I asked you too many
the
questions.
initial thought I had was about the really morbid fascination with specifically the fertility of the figure of the child, the endangered cissexual white child that is driving so much of the monstrous kind of anti-trans children bills that are going through at the moment. And you know,
wait. I was screwing around with my knitting and I didn't realize where Sophie was going with that. Sophie is saying, holy shit. I haven't heard Sophie say this before. Sophie is saying that society is obsessed with the idea of fertility, and the only reason that we all think it's a bad idea for children to be medicalized and have gender transition surgery as children, or like cross-sex hormones or any of that, is because we're just all obsessed with this idea of fertility. Like, you know, it's no, why does anyone care if these children are permanently sterilized by having cross-sex hormones and gender reassignment surgery before they're old enough to go to war or smoke a cigarette or have a drink or even rent a car? Like, why does it matter? Like, you guys are just so obsessed with fertility. Fertility is just a tiny thing. Yeah, Paula, don't worry. We're going to rewind. Hang on. Where did she say? Here it is. Okay.
I think I threw like 7 questions together into my last answer. The initial thought I had was about the really morbid fascination with specifically the fertility of the figure of the child, the endangered cissexual white child that is driving so much of the monstrous kind of anti-trans children bills that are going through at the moment. And
it's just because the white cis Republicans and Trump supporters are they're obsessed with the fertility of the white cis children. And that's why they don't want children to be trans, because they're just unduly obsessed with why are they so obsessed with the fertility of children? Why would that matter? Wow, Sophie. Wow. Mask off, Sophie. So Sophie. Like, I know that this was going on a YouTube channel that only has like 80 subscribers, okay? So you probably didn't expect people to actually see you say that. But yo, Sophie, I like you. I want you to be talking on the internet for a long time. You never say that out loud again, Sophie. I'm giving you really good advice right now. Never say, you're just too obsessed with maintaining the fertility of cis white children. Sophie, it sounds a little death cultish, a little eugenicsy, a little death. Let's just listen to that. Yeah, it's kind of like even a black man, Sophie, black man, not Vince is really not white, Sophie. Like, he's telling you just had a full-on Thanos moment, Sophie. Let's just listen one more time to Sophie be like, I just don't know why fertility in cis white children is such a big deal.
That was about the really morbid fascination with specifically the fertility of the figure of the child, the endangered cissexual white child that is driving so much of the monstrous kind of anti-trans children bills that are going through at the
I
moment.
mean, I just want to say that I've communicated with like more than a few detransitioners. And you know what, Sophie? Those detransitioners are pretty pissed off that you messed with their white cis fertility. And those detransitioners are going to win a metric F ton of money in the lawsuits that are currently pending because they were robbed of their white cis fertility by adults who lied to them.
And that there was so much work on this that I was only recently made aware of, and I critical childhood studies has been making links between the kind of the abolitionist kind of work to decarceralize, decriminalize sort of Black children and Black youth, and to even bring Black childhood into a place where it kind of means something comparable to the demands for care that can be made in the name of white cissexual fertile children in America, right?
All right, let me take this super chat from Beth. Beth, thank you. I saw a meme today where this kid is saying, "Let me get this straight. I can't pick my own bedtime, but I can pick my own gender." That's a good meme, Beth. Yeah, kids can't do lots of things. That's but this is why, to be serious, and I know memes aren't serious, but like this is why they want to get rid of parental rights, because when you have parental rights and you have parents doing things like bedtimes, and not all parents do bedtimes, but like that's bringing order and structure to a child's life. You get rid of parental rights and you put them into the collectivized care of the state, like watch what happens next.
And can have demands for care kind of linked to them in the first place, because the trans panic is perhaps a reproductive panic, is part of a kind of need to there's a riddle here, but the links between the critical race theory panic and the sort of anti-abortion stuff and the trans child stuff, I think, has to do with the right to reproduction of a certain kind of nationhood via and the perils of sort of of damaged fertility in the figure of the future of the nation, which is implicitly a white body, but which is why people permit themselves to to think about children's genitals while calling trans people pedophiles, or to indeed, have these sorts of contradictory ideas about parental authority and parents' rights as sacrosanct, whilst making really clear that it's only certain kinds of parents who will be treated that way.
This is another argument that they're making about parental rights, and the conservative right really needs to listen to what Sophie's saying right now. And I want you to just skip over the fact where Sophie was being hyperbolic about the arguments being made about grooming. What Sophie just said is conservatives consider parental rights to be sacrosanct, but only parental rights for conservatives, which means that Sophie is saying directly that conservative parents are trying to take away parental rights from leftist parents. And Sophie is right. She's right about that. And this is the problem, because when you make an argument for parental rights, you have to make the argument that parental rights applies to every parent, regardless of if you agree with the decisions that they are making for their children or not. And this is where conservatives lose the plot. Because if you want to make decisions about your children, then you need to allow your liberal neighbor down the road who is angry at you for having a Trump sign in your yard, you need to allow that parent to make decisions about their children. You don't get to parent their children just because you think you know better. And this is the argument that if conservatives don't wrap their heads around this, that I'm sorry, parents are allowed to fuck up their kids. Conservative parents fuck up their kids all the time. Conservative parents raise really sexually repressed kids. And that manifests itself in all sorts of wacky ways. All right? Leftist parents fuck up their kids too. All parents fuck up their kids to some extent or another. The problem is that if conservatives make the argument of parental rights for me and not for thee because I don't agree with your parenting methods, they are going to ultimately lose parental rights for everyone. Because the left is going to make the argument that conservatives, you don't really mean parental rights. You just mean parental rights for you. Why can't I do what I want with my kids? And then conservatives are going to be like, what you're doing is harmful, even if it's not really. Because I have had conservatives, literally thousands of them, thank you, Matt Walsh, make the argument in my Twitter feed that leftist parents should not be allowed to show their children an R-rated movie in their own home. Conservatives never restrict themselves. This is the problem. If conservatives were restricting their argument to, can we just not do gender transition surgery on the children? Can we just not do it on the children? Like, let them become adults. Can we just, like, that would have been a solid argument. But what conservatives do is they go from, you can't do gender transition surgery on the children, to, you can't go to private events with drag queens, not public events, not events in school. You can't take your children to private events with drag queens, to, you can't take your children to a parade, to, parade shouldn't be allowed to exist, to, you can't show your child a movie in your own home, to, you can't give your child books that I don't approve of. They start with something that makes sense, and then they expand out into all levels of insanity that has nothing to do with protecting children at all. It has to do with advancing conservative Christian values. And I'm sorry, guys, not everyone wants to be a conservative Christian. Not everyone wants to raise their family as conservative Christians. So if you had narrowed the focus and just said, can we not do gender transition surgery on the children? That would have been fine. But that's never, ever, 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 ever what happens. If you want to protect parental rights for yourself, then I'm sorry, but that also means protecting the right of leftist parents to have school choice, to send their child to a private school run by drag queens if they want to. Because fucking up their child is I'm sorry. It is, parents are going to do that. If a leftist parent wants to send their child to a school, a private school using school choice money or whatever, run by drag queens and non-binary people because that is the education they want them to have, I will really pray for those children that they turn out normal. I really will. But that is what parental rights means. Parental rights means that parents get to make decisions for their children that you disagree with. But in return, you get to make decisions for your children that they would disagree with. And that's the rub, guys. You don't get to rule over anyone. And what that means is that they don't get to rule over you. And if we can all just come to that agreement and then hope and pray that the kids turn out normal, because they are actually pretty resilient. Kids are resilient. Everyone carries baggage out of childhood. There's always going to be something that happens. You can't protect people from everything, conservatives. And if you really do believe in God like you guys claim you do, then you have to trust that God is looking out for those kids and is going to take care of whatever problems are created by the crazy leftist ideas of their parents. And it's just the way it goes. Rottweiler says, kids are red identity, adults' parents are black identity. This is not about parental rights. It's about driving a generational wedge. It's Maoism. I'm gonna have to ponder that one, Rottweiler. I'm not sure I'm on board entirely with the analogy. You're probably right, and I just need to think about that one a little bit, but I'm gonna think about it, I promise. And I do appreciate the super chat. Let me just scroll through the chat here. I want to see if there's anything I want to respond to in the chat because I wasn't really looking at it as I was ranting. All right. Thank you, guys. Let's continue.
parent is affirming of a child's transness or comradely, then suddenly that parental authority goes out the window, right? Is non-existent anymore. Does not matter. In fact, proves a sort of
well, they become a danger.
Yeah, they become a danger. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Gosh. Okay.
Should we think about seeing if people have some questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much for that really, really engaging discussion. I hope folks should be able now to text in the chat. And I think we're a small enough group that if anyone would like to just unmute themselves to ask a question, I think that would be okay. But otherwise, you can type something into the chat. Heather, you want to get in on this?
I would like to, yeah. Thank you guys so much. That was
John
an amazing
Morgan
presentation and conversation. It was awesome. So much to think about, but I guess just because I work on specifically sort of queer LGBT issues, like
this
I'm
is
just
a they
kind
them
of wanted to think a bit about that a lot of sort of anti-family thinking has come out of that context, of course. Lee Edelman, you know, Fuck Orphan Annie, and just alternatives to the family. But I guess just to speak for a second to, like, you know, someone that I'm very partial to your kind of invocation of pain and the pain of exclusion. So it seems clear to me that the whole gay marriage thing comes out of the long history of exclusion from the couple and the family, right? That's a kind of reaction formation. So I think we understand that, or we can understand that in that context. But I guess I was sort of specifically curious, and maybe this is more of a question for Sophie, about the sort of, you know, the kind of utopian thinking about queer kinship and why that choice of kinship, and you know, do we understand that as a kind of you know, as a kind of false consciousness, like why embrace the very thing that has been such a problem? And I guess maybe, I mean, this is maybe asking too much, but in a way, the sort of, you know, I'm completely into the move from sort of kinship to comradeship. But you know, what do we, if we're thinking about it, you know, as different ways to describe non-biological intimacies, let's say, what do we lose, or what do we fear losing in sort of changing what we call that, in a sense, right? Because I think, you know, people are often using these terms to refer to, you know, something they think of as sort of the same thing, right? And kinship is a way to say, like, no, we really mean it. Like, you know, if you get sick, I'm going to take care of you, like that, you know, that these are lifelong connections, right? People are using kinship to name certain kinds of intimacies. So it's a bit of a formless question, but I'm just, I just wanted to respond because I've thought a lot about these issues in a sort of queer context. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to try and not fangirl too much about you specifically posing this to me. you did paraphrase. I mean, I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting you properly before,
No,
but
no, it's true. It's true.
What you just said is, yeah, bang on the money. What I have been kind of noodling you know, when we use the metaphor of kinship, we are, in my opinion, you know, yeah, as you said, I will take care of you when you're sick. The
kinship, they can use this term a lot of ways. So biological kinship is going to be biological relation, but they might also mean like a family of choice sort of thing, where it's not like a biological like kin as we might think of kin. So you kind of have to listen for the context. I've heard her use it both ways before. That's a good question, online subscriber.
specificity of it is almost the idea that I have no choice but to do so, right? That's the promise. That's what feels good about it. If I say to you, you're kin, it's basically, you know, this gets very kind of philosophically like infinite regression-y, I think, because I'm sort of saying to you, like, why would I need to say it if it was true? You know, if there was some kind of automaticness to the caring for you when you get sick. Sorry, how to make this make sense, but I think so. You know, we know that quote unquote real kin fail each other at best all the time, and at worst and very, very frequently harm and murder one another and rape one another. Nevertheless, it doesn't register as a horrible threat when an airline says, we're all family here. We don't go.
See, I told you, Sophie has daddy
Get off the
issues.
plane
Something
right now.
happened between Sophie and her. She's like, you can do all these
So the
horrible things
metaphor,
to each
you know,
other.
is about like, I think, I don't know, I trace links between it and the fantasies we have about automation. Like, you know, nature and automation is actually part of this language. Like, I would not have the choice. I would not choose to get up every morning and make kinship, because the name has already made that choice for me. Something else, God, the state, the sanction of a marital union, or the sanction of a blood magic, you know, you know, and so that's very appealing, isn't it? It makes us feel safe. There's no mystery really, but you know, when those utopian queer movements, and so, you know, so many of them, so many have said the same thing, you know, about kinship being something we make as we will. Yeah, sure. Like, you know, it's a bit like my sort of thoughts about surrogacy. Like, yes and no. Like, how? Like, the original kinship is also made. Actually, it just has managed to shore up so much legitimacy that we don't really think of it that way anymore. But kinship is always made, not given. So then where does that sort of really bring us when we make kinships with a hyphen, you know, chosen or queer, or actually we wouldn't put hyphens there, never mind, but you get what I mean. Like, if queer kinship was really just as good as the real thing, then I wouldn't really have to say.
What she means by queer kinship, anytime we hear the word queer, what does that mean, guys? Pop quiz in the chat. Anytime we hear the word queer, what does that mean? It doesn't mean gay. It doesn't mean trans. You do not have to be gay or trans to be queer. What does she mean when she says that word? And I'm just waiting for the chat delay. Someday in the future, there will be. So, okay, Marxism, far political left. Yes, yes. Rail against the norms. That's exactly right. George, Vince, against the norms. Queer is about pushing back against what is considered normal. Okay. And yes, it is also Marxism as well. It is. That's where it comes from. But anytime they like, queer kinship is not Marxist kinship. Okay. Queer kinship is non-biological kinship. The more colloquial phrase would be family of choice. Because what Sophie would argue is that queer people, because they're queer, not gay, not trans, but pushing back against societal norms, they are ostracized from their families. They are thrown out because their families are not a safe place for queer people. And so queer people have to find each other and have to form families of choice with each other, and maybe living pods with each other in which multiple queer people, probably in a polyamorous relationship, come together to live as though they are a biological family. That is what they're ultimately striving for. Is like these pod, like pod is the wrong word. It's basically like living arrangements that are not based on like marriage or like biological kinship or things like that. It's people who choose to live together, which can be fine. I'm not, you know, families of choice are a thing, and families of choice need to be a thing because not everyone gets along with their family, all right? It's just the way it goes. But what Sophie is explicitly arguing is that queer people forming these relationships outside of the biological family is queering kinship. Everyone understand?
The queer part, would I? I don't know. If it was just
Yes.
anyway, these are sorts of my like
Roommates. Exactly, Sin.
concerns
Roommates.
about that. I'm with Donna Haraway in the 80s when she says I'm sick to death of kinship metaphors. Actually, I think 90s. But then she sort of, you know, in the 21st century, is just going, fuck it, you know, kin making all the way. And there's something really interesting about that turn. I do think it's a narrowing of political ambition. But I think I've said enough. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
I guess
Anyone?
Simone is so confused right now. Poor Simone. I really feel for her.
Heather.
I do.
I guess what I want to say is something like in the effort to, I won't even use the word kinship or family or anything, in the effort to sort of reconstitute networks of support and love and intimacy. I like the word intimacy, actually, it's the word I prefer. The problem is that effort is under so many attacks that it is easier and in some ways preferable, you know, from an efficiency standpoint to make the sort of like hyphenated kinship move. And I get it. The problem is that I don't think that we have a whole lot of discourse around the ways in which there's pressure on the alternative networks that are outside the movement context. I guess this is a point I'm trying to make, that so that if in fact one lives in a situation where one is constantly reconstituting intimacies and literally building them up from scratch, right? There are going to be various instances where, and I mean, I'm speaking as if this is abstract. It isn't. I do it every day. You know, like, you know, there's going to be, you know, a baby daddy who's going to be able to interrupt, right, every effort that you make in order to reconstitute the parental or, you know, or you know, sort of raising effort that's being made by a variety of mothers, right? Every single time there's going to be that interruption, that intervention, and there's going to be state support of it. And we could use almost any example of intimacy or care with a coupled system of attack on it. And so, I mean, we've got a problem, and I do think that I don't know how to solve it, but it's the exposure that is sort of like the exposure that's my current sort of area of concern.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from folks in the audience? I have a slightly off-topic question, but just listening to the two of you today, I was thinking about how both of you have made like some of your most exciting, but also like perhaps most accessible interventions through like other aesthetic means. Like Simone, you're talking about what teachings might be held in trap music, and Sophie, I've like really enjoyed reading so much of your cultural analysis and film reviews. And so I'm wondering if there's anything that either of you are watching or listening to that's informing your work right now, or that captures something that you're interested in related to these topics we've been hearing about today.
What a question.
Well, if you don't mind me going first, Simone, I guess I will say for my sins, I do have a fascination with the romance reality genre, or the reality romance genre, things like Love Island, Love is Blind, the huge proliferation.
Love Island is great.
Which, you know, I do want to, you know,
I haven't watched
never
it
been
so
a TV
long.
show I don't want to do a sort of Marxist feminist analysis on, but like, what is it about Love Island, for instance, the UK show, that intrigues me so much. I think maybe I don't need to rationalize. In fact,
I'm going to tell you what intrigues you about Love Island, Sophie. You need to get laid. You need to get laid really, 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 really good. That's what intrigues you about Love Island. You have never allowed you, and honestly, Sophie, and listen, this might be a little TMI, you probably need to get dominated. I'm just saying, Sophie, like there's something like you need to let the fuck go. And I'm saying totally voluntarily, consensual, all that stuff. But like you need to let the fuck go and lighten up. Maybe, Sophie, maybe this is going to be really inappropriate. I'm going to say it anyway. We're almost at 3 hours in the stream. Sophie, you could probably work out so many of your daddy issues if you just found a good dom. It would be Sophie, it would be life-changing. That's why you're obsessed with Love Island, Sophie.
Probably I shouldn't, but there is something about the way at the end of each season of this show, a plastic baby robot, I kid you not, gets brought out, and every heterosexual couple has to parent this baby for a day. It will cry, and you have to kind of like shake it when it cries, and and you get rated for your prowess as a parental couple at the end. Based on the robots, and the baby sometimes does get thrown in the pool, that there are moments of real, but so this whole kind of like pageant of like, there are so many of them. Everywhere you look, there's a show that's about finding Mr. or Mrs. Right, Mr. or Miss Right, even getting engaged to them on TV, within days of meeting them, which kind of seems to increasingly desperately say, like, we want the family, we want marriage and a baby and a family and private property. That is what we want, right? We do, right? We definitely want that, right? And this baby thing at the end is almost like a kind of, it makes me think that the whole operation is designed to kind of make you think, right, nothing could be worse than the Love Island villa, literally, this parody of communal life. That's the secret to it. Sorry, you really kind of opened a can of worms here, Maria.
She really has gone off onto a whole Love Island
you're looking
tangent.
at a rehearsal of marriage and domesticity, but actually you're looking at 12 people bored out of their minds after 8 weeks.
Sophie thinks that Love Island is communism. Sophie's like, this is what my perfect communist utopia looks like. It's Love Island. And then they bring in the interloper child and they ruin the communist utopia. Sophie needs to get laid so bad.
So 24/7 scrutiny that in a sort of in a faux collective situation, a pseudo commune. So what are they doing? They're fleeing into domesticity and marriage. You have to create a situation that horrifying to make this kind of baby thing.
Oh, she doesn't think it
horrible.
represents the utopia.
Challenge.
She thinks it represents the dystopia. Sorry,
kind of,
I misunderstood. She still needs to get laid though.
Experience of social reproduction. That's my best kind of. I think we're looking in our millions at these shows to sort of maybe almost squint and see if there's other ways of doing life. Like, is marriage in the couple forum really the only available option? Or are there kinds of lines of flight that we can detect, alternatives that we might be able to glean a glimpse of? Because at the same time, on the next channel or the next play, the thing next up is the Cult Psychology Survivor documentary, which is a very different vision of social reproduction, which also appeals to us. We also think we could get sort of seduced into cults very easily because of our desire, I think, which is crazy.
It would take way more than a
belonging and being known and having everything taken care of for you in a sort of community togetherness kind of spirit, right? So we have these two very different things, the kind of like reality romance couple forum generating shows and the sort of cult shows. And I think we basically have the same relation to both. We're like, which is more likely to get us, a spouse or a cult guru? Because we actually know the answer to that statistically. We know perfectly well who actually causes harm on a statistically significant scale, right? It's family members, it's spouses, it's your boyfriend, but instead we kind of pretend that it's like a predatory kind of groomer, you know, such as the drag queen reading to your child in a public library, or you know, perhaps the cult figures we love to make TV about. Okay, I'm going to shut up now.
I don't know. I think the thing that I've been most interested in lately is actually clothes. And I don't have any, like, I mean, I'm always sort of working, I'm continuing to write about some, you know, the tail ends of the sort of gender, sexuality, hip hop stuff. But I've been super interested. I have a renewed interest in clothing and like luxury clothing in particular. I've always been sort of interested, but I've renewed interest in it. And partly, I don't know what has happened. I think, you know, I sort of it loses my attention because nothing interesting happens. And then some designer will come with something really incredible. And lately, guess what it is? You'll laugh. It's been it's been the new Celine line is and what Celine is doing with Carhartt, which does have to do with all this genders. My interest in sort of like genderless clothing, I guess. Anyway, I'm super interested in it, and in particular, the leather ones.
The bougie
But I would
ones,
never write about
the
this.
bourgeois
I would
ones,
never write about
is what you're
this. I just-
saying.
it's
The
just a
expensive
joy
ones.
to
Listen,
think about.
being a freelance writer is weird sometimes. You're not
Yeah.
always choosing what you
She's
write about.
bougie
the
AF.
great luxury and joy is to truly
Sophie
to
is
have some
not
sense
buying the
that
leather
you're writing
clothes.
what you
She's
think
not
needs to be
doing
said. But,
that.
you know, I wondered if you had an opinion
Sophie
on
is the
Rihanna
true believer.
outfit at the Super Bowl
Simone
halftime show,
is
because I
not.
you know, I did a stupid tweet about it because I thought that the outfit was saying what I looked at the discourse and people were all saying when she beamed down, it was saying, is this feminism or is this pregnancy? You know, those were the two options.
Oh, really?
Based on how before it came out that the answer was pregnancy, although you could ask why not both. But you know, the way she was covered from neck to toe and indeed from to fingertip, you know. And I in the end I said yes when an editor asked me to analyze that in terms of.
Oh, really? Are you writing about Rihanna's outfit? That's so interesting.
Well, you know, I won't turn down the money, but I wondered if you had a take, because there was this way she was swaddling herself in these kind of labial waves of crimson that made me kind of feel that there was a sort of gestational power.
I'm choosing to look away from Rihanna at this moment.
One day I will have the luxury of doing so too.
There's too much going on. The performative baby.
Also, can I just say this about like not? I mean, they're about to wrap up in a second, but like, can I just say this about like non-gender clothes? Have these people never heard of fucking t-shirts? Like, t-shirts, like button-down shirts, hoodies. None of these things have genders, and they've been around effing forever. They also haven't heard of androgyny. It's like David Bowie was like never a real thing at all. It's like they think that they just invented all of this, when in fact, they're literally just reliving like the 70s. In some respects. Maybe the 80s. I don't know. But I mean, I'm wearing a t-shirt and a pair of leggings right now. There's no, I mean, I guess the leggings are pink technically, but like, you're not, like, gym shorts, exactly. Effing gym shorts, unisex t-shirts. Men have worn makeup forever. They're called rock musicians. Have you never seen Kiss? Like, I mean, I continue to be flabbergasted that these people think that like non-binary clothes are like a new thing.
Making is a lot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, agreed. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just because we're out of time, I guess this is the note we're wrapping up on. So I apologize, / you're welcome.
All right, I guess they're wrapping up then. I guess that's it. Well, guys, if that was your first Abolish the Family, not Socialism Saturday, but midweek socialism stream, Congratulations, you survived. Now, as a reminder, we do Socialism Saturdays on this channel every Saturday at 6 p.m. So if you want to come and watch Socialism with us, that happens at least once a week. And every once in a while, I do throw in a little midweek socialism as well, just to make sure people are seeing this stuff. Because honestly, if there's one stream of mine that you attend, well, happy hour is an introduction. Happy hour is on Fridays at 5 p.m. So I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. and then Saturdays at 6 because we go live a little bit later. It's my weekend too. But if you come to happy hour, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a woke training from start to finish. Happy hour is like, it's kind of like your normal kind of introduction to what the woke left teaches. Socialism Saturday is your advanced AP class. It's throwing you into the deep end. And we try to make it fun, and we have fun, and there's drinks and all that stuff. But this is the way that you are going to be able to know what is coming next for the left so that you can see into the future, and you will know what's happening before any of the journalists, any of the commentators, any of the pundits, any of the Twitterati, when they're all acting surprised on Fox News and said, I can't believe that this is happening. We will have already known because we will have watched it 2 years ago on Socialism Saturday. Okay? And so if you want to be ahead of the game, this is the place to do it. Guys, please mount that like button on the way out the door for me. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already, and turn on those notifications too. And as a reminder, it's Tuesday. And that means this is not my last stream of the day. This is just my first stream of the day. And I will be taking a little break, getting some dinner. And then I will be back in an hour and a half at 9:30 p.m. And we're doing Nothing Remotely Controversial with Joshua tonight. This is a fun show. This is a lighthearted look at the news. Joshua is a professional psychic, really. And he will use his psychic and astrology and tarot card prowess to help us predict what is going to happen in the world. And even if you don't believe in psychics or think that they are hell's angels or any other thing, you can still come and have a great time. We really enjoy it. It's a fun show. Everyone loves Joshua way more than they love me. It's okay. I know. I understand. All right. It's why I keep him around so much. But guys, that is all we have for right now. I will see you in a little bit. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.